Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're going to wake up somewhere strange, somewhere very strange, and not in a wow, where are my pants kind of the way, but more of a why does everything smell like onions and animal fat kind of way. Tonight we're opening our eyes in the thick of the medieval world. Real dirt, real plague, real peasants. You're not special, you're not a king or knight or a destined sorcerer, you're just there, waking up on the floor with no clue what century it is, or why you're spooning a chicken. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments what time it is where you are and what city you're listening from. I always read those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes creak open to dim grey light filtering through wooden slats overhead. You try to stretch, but something sharp pokes your ribs. Straw. You're lying on a heap of straw. Not the golden movie kind. This stuff itches, smells musty, and is sprinkled with things you really don't want to identify. Your nose curls. The air is thick with the aroma of smoke, something wet and mouldy, and a touch of manure for spice. You sit up slowly and immediately bonk your head on a wooden beam. Low ceilings. You rub your scalp and notice your hands look wrong. Dirty. Reddened. Calloused. You've got medieval peasant hands now, apparently. Blinking, you scan the space. It's a single room, bare, dark, with beams overhead blackened by years of smoke. A small fire crackles in a pit of stones in the centre of the floor, smoke trailing lazily toward a hole in the ceiling instead of a chimney. Around the fire, a few lumpy human forms are still asleep, cocooned in rags. One of them farts softly. You're home. You look down. You're wearing a coarse tunic that hits mid-thigh, stained with something greasy and possibly alive. There's a belt made of twisted rope holding it shut. No underwear, no shoes. Your legs are muddy, scratched, and definitely not waxed. You suddenly miss modern plumbing like it was a long-lost friend. Your mouth feels like it's been sandblasted, and your tongue tastes like smoked leather. You look around for a bathroom. There is none. A small soot-smeared child, gender unclear, is staring at you. They look suspicious, like maybe you're a ghost or a fever dream or an especially chatty rat. They hold a chunk of stale bread in one grubby hand and chew it slowly, never breaking eye contact. A chicken hops onto your lap and pecks your arm. It's oddly personal, you're too stunned to react. Okay, you tell yourself, maybe this is a dream. Maybe you just fell asleep watching that BBC historical drama and your brain is playing tricks. But when you reach for your pocket to grab your phone, there's nothing. No pocket, no phone. Just your grimy tunic and some very cold toes. You try to stand. The floor groans under you and your knees pop like fireworks. Every joint complains. You feel weirdly older. Is that arthritis already? One of the sleeping figures grumbles and sits up. A woman, probably wrapped in layers of wool and rags. Her hair is in thick braids, matted with grease and straw, and her eyes squint at you like she's trying to decide whether to greet you or chase you off with a ladle. You look ill, she croaks, in an accent so thick it feels like molasses. You ain't taken by demons, are ye? Before you can answer, she makes the sign of the cross and hurls a spoonful of something herbal smelling directly at your chest. It's official. You're in medieval Europe, probably somewhere in England, judging by the language. The exact year? Hard to say. Definitely pre-electricity, pre-toilet, pre-soap, possibly pre-common sense. Your brain spins trying to figure out what to do next. Leave? Stay? Scream? Before panic takes full control, you notice something oddly peaceful about the scene. Sunlight begins to stretch across the floor, filtering through cracks in the wooden walls and catching particles of dust in the air. The fire crackles. Outside, a rooster crows, loud, proud, and obnoxious. Somewhere far off, a bell tolls. You shuffle toward the door and lift the wooden latch. It creaks open to reveal a muddy village square, surrounded by other timber-framed houses like the one you just crawled out of. A few thin cows meander past. A man with a cart full of turnips yells something in your direction. It's early, cold, and this entire world smells like a wet goat. But here's the thing. You're alive, confused, itchy, slightly grossed out, but alive. And now you've got a choice, blend in or stand out. Live cautiously or ask questions and risk accusations of sorcery. The game has begun. Historical fact. Most peasants lived in simple one-room homes made of wattle and daub, with straw roofs and dirt floors. Entire families, and their animals, often slept together for warmth. Quirky fact, in some villages roosters were considered lucky and were even tried in animal courts if they misbehaved. Yes, chicken trials were a thing. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue about just how grim peasant life really was. Some suggest they had more leisure and autonomy than we assume. Others argue it was back-breaking survival 24/7. The first thing you notice about breakfast is that it's not really breakfast in the way you know it. There's no smell of coffee, no flickering blue light from a microwave reheating a breakfast burrito. There's just smoke from the fire, damp air clinging to your skin, and the very real risk that whatever you're about to eat still has eyes. The woman who semi-blessed you with a spoonful of herbs earlier hands you a crude wooden bowl. You look down, and it's filled with a greyish paste that sloshes when you tilt it, something between watery oatmeal and regret. You glance around. Everyone else is eating theirs without hesitation. Slurping, actually. Some with fingers. One guy stirs his with a stick. You take a cautious taste. It's gritty, like licking the floor of an old barn with hints of turnip and wood ash. Is it porridge? Is it punishment? The answer is yes. Your stomach gurgles, unsure whether it's being fed or threatened. You take another bite, trying not to gag. Across from you, a boy with straw-coloured hair and a lazy eye snickers. "Ne'er had pottage before, stranger," he says, mouthful, spraying you with flecks of mystery grain. You manage a polite shake of the head. He laughs like he's just discovered fire. "We gets this most days. Sometimes my mum adds leeks. Real fancy that." His voice is proud, like he's describing a Michelin-starred soufflé. You nod appreciatively, still chewing something that may be a pebble. Eventually your bowl is empty and your stomach, out of desperation, not satisfaction, settles into a tentative truce with whatever just happened. You notice something else as you eat. Meat is absent. In fact, no one here seems to have even a slice of bacon, not even the sad, wilted kind that hides in the back of your fridge at home. It dawns on you that this isn't unusual. For most peasants, meat is a rare luxury, saved for feast days, stolen if you're desperate, or imagined in dreams. Livestock aren't food, they're tools, investments, tax burdens. You've entered the land of bread, beans, and thin soups. Outside, you hear a loud thwack, then another. You peek out and see a man chopping wood with a splintered axe. He's barefoot, his feet caked in mud. A dog licks the blade between strikes. Nearby, a few children chase each other with sticks, and one falls directly into a pile of something squishy and probably biological. No one reacts, that's just the morning. A woman walks by balancing a basket on her head. Inside it, something pale and twitching. You blink. It's a pig's head. She gives you a nod like this is normal. Because it is. Someone calls your name, except it's not your real name. It's some weird mangled version like Yarny or Goffin. You turn anyway. The older woman from the house motions for you to follow her to the back where an open fire pit has been set up. A pot bubbles over it. You recognise the smell immediately. Boiled cabbage, shong, eye-watering. The woman plunges a crude ladle into the pot and tastes it, smacking her lips. You help where you can, stirring, fetching water from a barrel, swatting flies the size of walnuts. The process of preparing food here is less culinary delight and more, how do we not die today? The cabbage is the main event, but there's also a hunk of bread being hacked into pieces with a knife that looks older than time. The bread is so hard you wonder if it doubles as a weapon. When it's finally your turn to get a slice, you bite down and feel your molars flinch in protest. It's like chewing on drywall, and yet somehow comforting, like you're part of something. Your second course of the day is small beer, a low-alcohol drink that everyone, including children, sips regularly. Because the water isn't safe, they drink this mildly fermented brew all day. It tastes like warm cereal backwash with a hint of sadness, but after a few gulps, your stomach feels better, or at least numb. Around midday, a man shouts from the square, "Tithes!" The word echoes like a threat. People start digging through their meagre belongings, eggs, onions, handfuls of few grain. You follow the crowd and see a monk standing near a cart holding a ledger the size of your torso. He's writing things down as people present their offerings to the church. You try to avoid eye contact, unsure if your soul is technically under warranty. By now you're learning the rhythm of the day. Simple food, constant labour, an underlying current of worry. Will there be enough to eat next month? Will the harvest be good? Will the Lord raise the taxes again? Even meals are laced with anxiety. Historical fact. Peasants' diets relied heavily on grains, legumes and root vegetables. Most meals were based on pottage, a type of stew made with whatever was available, often the same ingredients every day. Quirky fact, bread was often so stale that people used trenchers, thick slices of bread, as plates. After meals, the trencher might be eaten, fed to animals or given to the poor, if the poor weren't already the ones eating off it. Scholarly debate. Some historians believe that medieval peasants actually had reasonably nutritious diets by necessity, while others argue malnutrition and periodic famine were common due to poor harvests and climate volatility. By late afternoon your body is sore, your hands are burned, and your stomach is making the same noise your phone does when it's dying. But oddly enough, you don't feel out of place. You helped make a meal, you ate with strangers, and no one's called you a witch yet. In this world, food isn't pleasure, it's fuel, bare minimum survival. But hey, you survived one more day, and if you're lucky, maybe dinner will have leeks. By now, you've accepted that this isn't a dream. Or if it is, it's the kind of dream that smells like boiled feet and never quite lets you wake up. You've eaten the grey pottage, braved the beer water, and endured the suspicious bread. Now it's time to meet the locals, and you're about to learn that in medieval times, first impressions aren't just based on your handshake, they're based on whether or not you reek of sulphur or look possessed. You step out into the muddy lane again trying to blend in, even though you clearly don't. You're taller than most of the people here for one. Your posture is too upright. Your teeth are too... there. Your skin, though dirty, is still suspiciously smooth compared to the sun-baked, wind-slapped, and soot-etched faces around you. And then there are your eyes. Darting, oranning, curious. You're acting like someone who's never seen a cow relieve itself directly onto someone's shoes, which just happened, by the way. The man doesn't flinch. You try smiling at a woman passing by with a basket of firewood. She stops dead in her tracks. Her eyes narrow. Her nostrils flare like she's trying to sniff out your intentions. Then she spits on the ground and mutters something under her breath that sounds vaguely like a spell. Or maybe just a rude insult. Either way, it's not, "Have a nice day." She shuffles off quickly, crossing herself. You make a mental note. No smiling. A wiry man with a face like sun-dried leather approaches you next. He squints at your tunic, your hands, your rope belt, and finally your face. "You're not from round here, are ye?" he says, more statement than question. You mumble something about being from far off, and that seems to satisfy him enough. "Hump," he grunts. "Long as you ain't got the devil in you." He turns and walks off, presumably satisfied that the devil would have better fashion sense. As you walk through the village, you get more of the same. Wary stares, murmured gossip, one childhood who hurls a clod of dirt at you and runs. You pass an old woman selling onions out of a sack. Her face so deeply wrinkled she looks like she was carved from oak. She gestures for you to buy one, and you shake your head. She glares. "Witch," she whispers, pointing at your feet. You look down, you forgot shoes again. Apparently even your bare feet are suspicious. You try to take this all in stride. These are people who have lived their whole lives in this tiny radius of Earth. Most haven't travelled farther than a few miles from their birthplace. Outsiders are rare. Outsiders who don't know how to churn butter, or who say things like and literally, are extremely rare. You're a walking anomaly, and they're treating you accordingly. A group of boys gathers near a well. They're playing a game involving a chicken feather, a stick, and a dead rat. You try not to look too closely at the rules. One of them notices you and calls out, "Oi, stranger, you ever seen a dancing goat?" Before you can answer, another boy jabs him in the ribs and whispers, "Don't talk to him. Ma says he's got spirits in him." The first boy crosses his eyes and flails his arms like a haunted puppet. They all laugh and scatter. You've been here 24 hours and already have a reputation. You pass a group of women scrubbing linens by the stream. They eye you as you walk by, whispering behind their hands. One of them, younger and bold, calls out, "You caught in anyone, stranger?" You try to laugh it off, but she grins and winks. "I'll have me to talk to your dare. I got 3 sheep in me dowry." She cackles. You're not sure if you've just been flirted with or threatened with livestock. Further down, near the edge of the village, you spot a man sitting on a stump, carving something from wood. He looks up and calls you over. You sit beside him, thankful for a break. He offers you a scrap of dried fish. You take it, chew cautiously, and feel it splinter in your mouth like fish-flavoured bark. Still, it is the kindest thing anyone's done all day. You'll get used to 'em, he says without looking at you. Takes a while. Folk here got short memories for kindness and long ones for strangeness. You nod. That tracks. He continues carving. They think anything new's cursed, but sometimes cursed things survive. That's something. You sit in silence for a while, watching birds flutter over the rooftops, occasionally shrieking in protest at the state of things. A goat trots by, dragging half a bucket, no one chasing it. In the distance, a church bell tolls, not for mass, just because it's been a while and medieval life needs structure, even if it's mostly mud and fear. Historical fact: in many medieval villages, people rarely travelled beyond 5 miles from where they were born. The tight-knit nature of communities meant that outsiders were treated with suspicion or outright hostility. Quirky fact: medieval villagers believed that sudden illness, strange behaviour, or unfamiliar accents could be signs of demonic possession or witchcraft. People even suspected left-handedness was a mark of evil. Scholarly debate. Historians debate whether the medieval peasantry was genuinely xenophobic or simply cautious due to the real risks of disease, spies, and unrest. Others argue that communities often welcome travellers with food and hospitality if they arrived with proper introductions. Back in the square, you see the boy with the lazy eye again. He waves. Maybe your first friend? Or maybe so he's just checking if you've grown horns yet. Either way, you wave back. You can only loiter and chew on air for so long before someone notices you're not contributing. In medieval society, idleness isn't just frowned upon, it's borderline criminal. If you're not working, you're either a beggar or a thief, and neither gets a warm reception. So before you can settle into a long, thoughtful stare at a mossy wall, a man with arms like tree trunks appears beside you and claps a hand on your shoulder hard enough to knock the wind out of your lungs. "You look like you've got hands," he grunts. "Come on then." You don't really have time to protest. The next thing you know, you're being dragged across the muddy street and handed a spade. Just like that, you're employed. Congratulations, your first medieval job appears to be digging something, or undigging, it's unclear. You're directed to a trench that smells like week-old swamp soup, and the man points down into the muck. "Drain in ditch," he says. "Gets backed up, you'll want to watch for frogs, or demons." You're not sure if he's kidding. Your boots, which don't exist, do nothing to protect your feet as you wade into the sludge. It's thick, cold, and clings like emotional trauma. Your spade hits something soft, then something hard, and then something that lets out a high-pitched squeal before darting away. You try not to scream. The work is slow and back-breaking, and it doesn't take long for your shoulders to ache and your lower back to start muttering threats. By midday, you're drenched in mud and sweat and possibly frog juice. You sit for a moment on a rock, only to have an older man glare at you. "Breaks for Sunday, not diggers," he barks. You stand back up. Sunday, right. You begin to wonder if death counts as a valid time-off request. That afternoon, someone mentions a different job. Rat catcher. It's apparently open because the last guy got bit in the neck and swelled up like a wineskin. You're offered a burlap sack and a stick with a nail in it. You take both, questioning your life choices. Again, the village is crawling with rats, big ones. They dart in and out of shadows like they're paying rent. You spot one under a pile of firewood and go after it with the stick, missing by inches and almost taking off your own toe. A little girl claps and says, "You're not very good at this." You resist the urge to tell her to try it herself, but she has a point. Still, after an hour you manage to catch one. You hold up your prize, victorious and mildly horrified. The rat hisses at you like it knows your browser history. You drop it in the sack and it immediately starts chewing a hole through the fabric. You make a mental note never to apply for pest control again. Later you're invited, no, assigned, to try gong farming. You're told the name with such enthusiasm that you think it might be something nice. It is not. Gong farming, it turns out, involves scooping human waste from cesspits and hauling it out of town. The pit itself is a horror show of smells and consistency you didn't know existed. You have a bucket, a scoop, and a questionable rope system. As you lean in, the smell slaps you across the face like a wet glove filled with onions and trauma. You gag. Hard. Your eyes water. You consider just walking into the pit and letting fate decide. By now, you've cycled through some of the most prestigious peasant jobs available. The bar is low, most work revolves around staying alive, and no one seems particularly happy about any of it. There are other gigs too, like herding geese, meaner than they look, turning spits in the Lord's kitchen, scolding and exhausting, or fetching water from the stream over and over again. Everyone works, even children, especially children. At one point you see a boy of maybe 8 years leading a donkey cart stacked with firewood. He slips, falls, gets back up without a sound and keeps walking. No one rushes to help. Not out of cruelty, but because this is just the way things are. You pull your aching body over to the nearest fence post and slump down, watching him disappear over the hill. A woman walks past and offers you a piece of dried apple. You take it gratefully. She asks, "You done with the ditch then?" You nod. "Good. That'll be the brewer needs someone to stir, big paddle, good for the arms." She winks, then walks off before you can beg her to leave you alone. You don't get to pick your job here. The village does. Need rules everything. Someone's sick. You help in the garden. A roof is leaking. You hold the ladder. A cow's having a difficult birth. Guess what? You're on mucus duty. Your old skills, typing, spreadsheet management, online sarcasm, are now completely useless. Here, if you can't swing, stir, dig or scrape, you're just one more mouth to feed. Historical fact. In medieval villages, most people were tied to agricultural labour, but many had secondary roles. Blacksmiths, millers, tanners, and yes, gong farmers. These jobs were often inherited, passed down like cursed family heirlooms. Quirky fact, gong farmers were required to work at night due to the smell. They made relatively high wages, but no one wanted to stand downwind of them at the market. Their tools had to be buried with them to avoid spiritual contamination. Scholarly debate. Some historians argue medieval people felt real pride in their work, while others believe many laboured under compulsion and crushing feudal pressure, with little room for autonomy or joy. By nightfall your arms hang like wet ropes. Your hands are blistered, your stomach growls, and your hair smells like medieval despair. But you did it. You worked. You earned your slop. You weren't tarred, feathered, or mistaken for a demon. Not bad for your first full day on the job, even if you now deeply regret learning what a gong farmer is. It starts with the sound of hooves. Slow, steady, deliberate. You're sitting near the edge of the village, elbows on your knees, trying to scrub something unidentifiable off your hands with a mossy rock, when you hear them. Not a cart, not a herd, not some barefoot farmer trundling by, but the unmistakable clop of a single proud horse. People begin to gather before the rider even comes into view. You stand, brushing off your tunic, not that it helps. He enters like he owns the road, robed in black, face thin and pale, a single silver cross swinging from his belt beside a long leather satchel. The horse is sleek and surprisingly clean, its coat gleaming as if it were never meant to share a road with pigs and peasants. The man dismounts in one smooth motion and is instantly swarmed, not in a frenzied way, but with bowed heads, hushed voices, and the kind of reverence usually reserved for lightning and plague. You realise you're looking at a priest, not the kind who delivers sleepy sermons and hugs people during the offering. No, this one's more like a cross between a judge, a detective, and a minor sorcerer. His eyes scan the crowd, cool and sharp, like he's already spotted who sinned this week. Then they land on you. And stay there! You swallow hard and try to look casual, like, yes, this tunic is mine, I totally belong here. And no, I definitely didn't Google how to thatch a roof in a past life. The priest walks toward the village centre, where the communal fire pit smoulders from last night's cooking. The village elder, a shrivelled man with a beard like broom bristles, hobbles forward and greets him with an awkward bow. "Father Merrick," he says, voice quivering, like jelly in a storm. "We thank you for gracing us. There's been some talk of signs, odd happenings, bad dreams." Merrick nods once, like this is standard procedure. Then he turns again, slowly, theatrically, and gestures for the crowd to part. You try to blend in with the cluster of onlookers, but the space around you has mysteriously widened. People are taking careful half steps away from you one by one. The space you occupy now looks suspiciously like an accusation. The priest's gaze lands squarely on you. "You, come." You hesitate. For the record, hesitation is not recommended in situations involving robed men and religious authority. A boy behind you nudges your spine. You stumble forward. Up close, the priest smells like incense and old leather. His hands are clasped in front of him, his eyes impossibly light. "I haven't seen you here before," he says. "I'm, new," you offer. Genius-level response. He studies your face. "From where?" You scramble. "Far off, just far, a smaller village, near the woods." He nods, but not in agreement. It's more like he's adding mental notes to your growing file. "And what do you believe?" he asks. His voice is gentle, but the question is not. The villagers lean in. This is the part they care about. Not where you came from, but whether your soul is salvageable. You pause. "I believe in God." Another pause. "Which one?" he asks. You blink. There's only supposed to be one, right? But this is a trap, you know it. Any hesitation, any confusion, and it's the river test for you. Sink or float, fire or stake. You quickly add, "The one who sent Christ, the one true God." You're rewarded with a flicker of something in his eyes. Approval? Amusement? It's hard to tell. He raises his hand and touches your forehead briefly, muttering Latin. You don't flinch, which seems to earn you a point. Then he moves on, greeting others, blessing the sick, scolding a young woman for not attending the last mass. You stand there, stunned but not smoking, which feels like a win. Later that evening, you're sitting by the fire, eating cabbage soup again because joy is a myth, when someone leans in and whispers, "Careful with Father Merrick. He's got eyes like a crow and a memory like the plague." You nod, holding your bowl tighter. The church isn't just the place you go on Sunday here. It's the engine behind the world. It owns land. It writes the rules. It answers only to God, or at least to people who claim to speak for him. Priests like Merrick aren't just spiritual guides. They're administrators, spies, and if needed, executioners. You find out later that the village keeps a list of suspected heretics. It's just a bit of parchment stuffed in a coffer, but names get added for all kinds of reasons. Being out late, reading without permission, bleeding too long during childbirth. Someone once made the mistake of whistling in the church. They're not on the list anymore. They're in the ground. You lie in bed that night, on straw again, because your spine deserves nothing, and think about the look in Father Merrick's eyes. You remember the question, "What do you believe?" The thing is, belief here isn't about what you feel, it's about survival. It's performance, obedience, and hope, all mashed into one. Belief is something you're watched for, tested on, punished over, and whether you actually believe doesn't matter. Historical fact: the medieval church held immense power, not just religious, but economic and legal. Priests often controlled land, taxes, education, and even law enforcement in rural areas. Quirky fact: some medieval villagers believed their priests had supernatural powers, like the ability to banish storms, curse crops, or smell lies. Literally smell them. Scholarly debate. Historians differ on how deeply common people internalised church teachings. Some argue genuine piety was widespread. Others suggest fear and routine obedience played a much larger role. You stare at the ceiling, listening to the low snores of your hutmates and the distant hoot of an owl. Father Merrick is still out there, probably sleeping on a feather mattress with proper bedding. And maybe that's fair. After all, he didn't have to catch a rat with a nail stick today. Still, you can't help but wonder how many people ended up burned because they blinked at the wrong moment. Morning arrives the way it always does here, without warning, subtlety, or mercy. A rooster screams its war cry just outside your windowless shack, and a child steps on your hand while trying to climb over you. Your entire body aches like you've been trampled by a cart of turnips. You groan, stretch, and immediately regret it. You've pulled something, possibly everything. Your straw bed has formed into a new geological layer around your back, and you sit up and look around. Your fellow villagers are already stirring, pulling on their tunics and cloaks and belts like medieval zombies gearing up for another day of toil. You reach for your own clothing. A heap of scratchy wool and shame in the corner. It's exactly what you wore yesterday, and the day before, and it will be what you wear tomorrow too. Because this, dear traveller, is the part of medieval life no one romanticises, the wardrobe. Your tunic is made of undyed wool the colour of dishwater. It smells like it was washed sometime last harvest, then used to dry a dog. You slide it over your head, flinch as the seams scrape your skin, and then begin the process of cinching it shut with a rope. It's not even a proper belt, just a knotted length of twine that keeps the whole sad ensemble from flapping in the breeze. There's no underwear. There's no concept of underwear, really. You tie your hose, tight-fitting woolen leggings, up to your tunic with little string loops. The hose have patches, runs, and a suspicious stain near the knee that you refuse to investigate. Once your legs are covered, You stuff your feet into what can only be described as medieval foot bags. Shoes made from stitched leather, no sole support, and no regard for human dignity. They feel like you're wearing damp tacos on your feet. Outside, the air is brisk and damp, and everything smells faintly of burning peat and cabbage. You take a few stiff steps and realise once again how relentlessly uncomfortable everything is. The wool itches. It itches in places you didn't know had nerve endings. Your knees chafe. Your belt sags. You're a walking burlap sack of suffering. You pass a woman lacing up her bodice, pulling the cords tight with a practiced tug. She glances at you and smirks. "First week's the worst," she says, tightening again until her chest looks like it's bracing for battle. "Wool gets softer with sweat." That's not comforting. Later, you're invited to help with laundry, an honour apparently. You follow a group of women down to the stream, each carrying a pile of clothing that might have last seen soap during the Crusades. Soap, by the way, is a relative term here. What they use is a mix of lye, animal fat and ashes, mashed into a gritty grey lump that smells like scorched bacon. Washing clothes is a violent affair. You pound the garments against rocks, then scrub them with the lye lump, then pound them again for good measure. The water is frigid, the soap burns, and your knuckles start bleeding halfway through. The women around you sing while they work, their hands moving with rhythmic brutality. One of them winks and says, "Gets the demons out." By the time you're done, your own tunic is only slightly less filthy than before. You hang it on a line strung between two trees, where it stiffens into a board-like shape in the cold breeze. Meanwhile, your underlayers dry directly on your body. You shiver, damp and itchy, wondering how anyone here hasn't just burst into tears and walked into the woods. Fashion here isn't just about looks, it's about status, function and survival. You notice this especially when the local reeve passes through. He's wearing a brighter tunic, trimmed in green, with a slightly less horrible hat. The villagers nod as he walks by. A coloured sash, a metal pin, or even extra buttons can tell you someone's rank. You're in slightly better than beggar chic. Barely. You watch as a group of men near the blacksmith's forge strip down to the waist, revealing rough-spun trousers and scarred backs. One of them is shirtless in the chill air, hammering metal while glowing with the kind of sweat only desperation can produce. No one seems to notice the cold, or maybe they just gave up complaining about it years ago. And then there are the hats. Medieval headwear is a whole genre. You've seen floppy wool caps, tight-fitting coiffes, hooded cowls, and some kind of pointy creation that looks like it escaped from a children's book. Hats aren't optional, they keep your head warm, cover your unwashed hair, and tell people whether you're poor but with land, or poor but pretending not to be. You're handed a linen coif, basically a baby bonnet for adults, and told to tie it under your chin. You do. It looks ridiculous. Everyone wears one. You're ridiculous together. That night you return to your straw mat and pull your damp tunic over your head, leaving it near the fire to dry. You lay down in your shirt and hose, because undressing fully is a luxury no one here can afford, not when your bedmates are a mixture of humans, livestock and lice. You scratch your leg and find a suspicious bite. You scratch again and feel something skitter. Oh, no. Lice are part of the uniform too. Historical fact, most peasants owned just one or two sets of clothing, often made from rough-spun wool or linen. Clothes were patched and repurposed until they disintegrated, then reused as rags. Quirky fact, buttons were rare among the lower classes and considered fashionable for the wealthy. Instead, people tied or laced their garments, sometimes with bits of string gut or even metal wire. Scholarly debate. Some historians suggest that peasants were actually more fastidious than once believed, washing clothes frequently and using herbal treatments to manage lice. Others argue hygiene was seasonal at best and largely neglected due to water scarcity and social norms. You roll over, your coif sliding off your head as you shift. Your tunic steams gently by the fire, and your hose are twisted around your legs like a snake having a panic attack. You sigh. Sleep comes slowly. But at least you're warm. Well, warmish. It starts with a sniffle, a harmless little twitch of the nose, barely noticeable over the constant background soundtrack of coughing and snorting in the village. You rub your face, dismissing it, but by midday you're dragging your feet, shivering despite the layers of itchy wool, and you've sneezed hard enough to scare off a goose, which here is basically an act of war. Your head is thick, your thoughts sluggish, you know what's coming, you're getting sick. And in medieval times, that's not just an inconvenience, it's an existential crisis. You try to power through it. You stack firewood badly. You chase a pig that wasn't actually escaping. You stir a pot of watery stew until you nearly faint face first into it. Finally, someone takes pity on you. An old woman with a face like an apple left too long in the sun grabs your wrist and peers into your eyes. "Your humours be off," she says gravely, and before you can ask what that means, she drags you into her home. It's darker than your place somehow, filled with bundles of herbs hanging from every beam. A fat cat sits in the corner, blinking at you as though evaluating your soul. You sit on a stool and try not to sneeze on anything sacred. The woman, Griselda, she tells you, with no hint of irony, begins rummaging through clay pots and goatskin bags. She crushes dried leaves, mumbles in Latin, spits 3 times over her left shoulder, and then thrusts a steaming cup of what smells like boiled sadness into your hands. You sip. It tastes like dirt mixed with pine needles and a hint of despair. She nods approvingly. Good. Now we draw the bad spirits out. This involves a heated brick, 2 toads, a bag of crushed garlic, and a leech she affectionately refers to as Nibbler. She places the leech behind your ear. You try not to scream, the garlic she smears on your chest, and the toad she sets near your feet. "For balance," she mutters, arranging them like small angry monks. Griselda explains that your illness is a result of an imbalance in your 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and a black bile. Apparently one of yours, probably phlegm, is being a diva. The cure? Realignment. That could mean herbs, charms, or, if you're lucky, a bit of bloodletting. You are not lucky. She reaches for a knife. A small one, to be fair, but sharp and stained and not something you want pointed at you. "Won't take much," she says. "Just a finger's worth." You back away slowly, knocking over a basket of dried nettles, and stammer something about feeling better already. She squints, unconvinced. Your colour's off. You've got heat behind the eyes. We could try a poultice or a frog in a sock. You choose the sock frog option, obviously. The sock is stuffed with lavender, mud, and one very annoyed frog. It's tied around your neck like the saddest scarf in history. You're told to sleep with it, which you do because resisting Griselda is a surefire way to wake up cursed or possibly married. The next day you wake up soaked in sweat, with frog prints on your chest and your head pounding like a cathedral bell. You shuffle outside pale and shaky. People avoid you, not because you look contagious, but because sickness is often seen as punishment, a divine slap on the wrist. Maybe you sinned. Maybe you looked at Father Merrick funny. Either way, no one wants your bad luck brushing off on them. A man offers you a clove of raw garlic to chew. A child hands you a drawing of a demon with your name under it. You accept both. Somewhere a cow sneezes. Even the livestock are on edge. You're advised to visit the physician. That's a generous word for what you encounter. He's a man in a robe with more stains than fabric, and his tools include a rusty scalpel, a wooden tongue depressor, and a book with more curses than cures. He examines you by poking your belly and sniffing your breath. Then he pulls out a star chart. Mars is in opposition, he says. That explains the congestion. You nod solemnly, because what else are you going to do? His diagnosis. Your spleen is overexcited. His treatment. You must wear red, avoid onions, and drink warm ale with powdered oyster shell mixed in. You do the first 2. The third ends up on the floor. Despite the lack of science, you eventually start to improve. Maybe it's Griselda's toad sock, maybe it's the garlic, maybe your immune system finally remembered it has a job. Whatever the reason, your fever fades, your head clears, and your appetite returns, which is unfortunate, because all that's available is more boiled roots. You realise that getting sick here is like rolling dice with death himself. There's no Advil, no antibiotics, no doctor you can sue. People die of infected splinters and bad soup. Some survive by sheer stubbornness and faith in frogs. Historical fact, medieval medicine was based on the theory of humours derived from ancient Greek and Roman texts. Illness was believed to stem from imbalances in these bodily fluids, and treatments included bloodletting, purging, and herbal concoctions. Quirky fact, leeches were a staple of medieval medical practice used to remove excess blood. Physicians often carried them in special leather pouches, and sometimes named them. Scholarly debate. While medieval medicine is often seen as primitive, some scholars argue it was more effective than we assume, especially with the use of herbal remedies. Others highlight its deep entanglement with superstition and astrology as major limitations. By the third day, you're upright again, weak but alive. You nod at Griselda as you pass her hut and she smiles knowingly. You never see Nibbler again. Hopefully he retired after your treatment. He earned it. You're left with one lesson. In medieval times, getting better isn't a right. It's a miracle. And you're fresh out of miracles. There's no such thing as a private moment in the medieval world. Not unless you're royalty, a hermit, or you've somehow convinced everyone you're a demon and should be left alone. Which, considering your recent bout with frog therapy and garlic scrubs, you're halfway there. But privacy? Forget it. At night, you don't retreat into a peaceful bedroom, light a candle, fluff a pillow, and binge at a podcast until you drift off. No. You shuffle into a smoky, single-room house that smells like sweat, wet wood, and milk gone rogue. You share your sleeping space with at least 7 other people. And that's not counting the goat. The moment you duck through the low door, you're hit with a wall of smells and sounds. Children squabbling, someone sharpening a knife near the hearth, a man dozing upright with his mouth open, snoring like a dying accordion. The fire's low, casting long, flickering shadows. The air is thick with the musty weight of centuries of burnt peat and unwashed wool. You move carefully, stepping over a sack of turnips and a piglet currently occupying someone's blanket. Your bed, such as it is, awaits in the far corner. A pile of straw, a burlap sack for a pillow, and a tattered cloak to throw over yourself if it gets cold, which it will. You lie down and immediately discover that the straw has shifted. There's a particularly sharp stalk that finds its way directly into your spine. You shift. Then again, the stalk follows you. It's your new bedmate. Someone blows out the tallow candle, and the room falls into darkness so thick it hums in your ears. Then the symphony begins. Coughs, snores, the gentle creak of old boards. Someone mutters in their sleep, something about sheep. Then a sharp rustling. You open your eyes and see 2 glowing dots moving in the dark. The cat, at least you hope it's the cat. A chicken flaps noisily from one beam to another above your head. You flinch. Someone farts long and proud and a toddler giggles in the dark. No one says anything. This is just what night sounds like here. You're not sleeping in a room. You're sleeping in a living organism made of limbs, breath and livestock. The very idea of having a bed to yourself is laughable. You're lucky to have a blanket. And since bathing is an annual suggestion more than a habit, everyone brings their own, let's say, aromatic presents to the party. It's cold too. Not cold like, I forgot to wear socks, but cold like, I can see my breath and my teeth are mad at me. You huddle under your cloak, knees to your chest, trying to conserve heat while a goose named Osric pecks absent-mindedly at your foot. You consider fighting him for the warmest patch of straw. In the corner, the eldest woman in the house, Milda, who you're pretty sure was born before time, starts whispering a prayer. You can't make out the words, but the cadence is hypnotic. The kids settle down, the snoring intensifies, and eventually, through sheer exhaustion and the soothing thump of a cow shifting its weight behind your head, you drift into something resembling sleep. It doesn't last. You're jolted awake by the sensation of something crawling across your arm. Your brain screams, "Spider!" But your heart's too tired to panic. You shake your arm. Whatever it was is gone, or hiding, or plotting. You roll over and find yourself staring directly into someone's open mouth. You shift again and get an elbow to the ribs. This time you grunt audibly. "Shh," someone hisses. You sigh into your straw and wonder what the going rate is for a mattress in this timeline. Or a wall, or a door that closes. When morning finally breaks, signalled by another enthusiastic rooster and someone stepping on your leg, you rise with every joint begging for retirement. Your tunic is wrinkled and damp from the sweat of your own nightmares. You pick straw out of your hair and mouth, scratch the bites on your ankle and try to pretend you feel rested. Everyone else seems used to this. They stretch, yawn, and begin their routines like it's normal to wake up next to your uncle, 2 goats and a barrel of fish. You step outside for air, and the cold hits you like a bucket of medieval guilt. Your breath clouds the morning as you scan the grey sky. There's still frost on the ground. You notice now that there's no concept of sleeping in, not unless you're ill or dead. The village hums with motion long before dawn fully arrives. Fires being stoked, bread being kneaded, water hauled from the stream. You rub your eyes with the back of your hand and find dirt there. Of course. Later, one of the villagers explains that private sleeping chambers are a luxury for nobles and clergy. The average family sleeps together in a single room to conserve heat and space. If someone dies in the night, well, they move them before breakfast, sometimes. Historical fact, medieval peasants typically lived in one-room homes where the entire family, and often their animals, slept in the same space. Beds were rare, and most people slept on straw-stuffed mattresses or directly on the floor. Quirky fact, some households had a bed of straw for guests called the truckle bed, which could be shoved under the main sleeping area during the day. But in most cases, guests just curled up wherever there was room. Scholarly debate. There's ongoing discussion among historians about how frequently animals truly shared peasant sleeping quarters. Some argue the presence of livestock indoors was more common in colder climates or in times of crisis, while others believe it's been exaggerated in folk accounts. You trudge back inside to fetch your boots. They're cold, damp, slightly chewed. You slip them on and stand by the hearth, watching the others go about their morning routines, none of them complaining. You feel the day ahead looming like a mountain of cabbages. You haven't slept well, you smell like goat, and a flea just bit your neck. But at least you didn't roll over into the fire again. Today is a big day in the village. The kind of day people mark on whatever passes for a calendar around here. Scratches on a beam, a notch on a stick. Or the one time someone's cousin stopped coughing. It's bath day. Not your bath day, the village's bath day. Singular. This is the moment you realise that all the smells you've been absorbing, breathing, and, let's be honest, contributing to have been building up toward this one glorious, questionable event. You don't get a heads up. There's no invite, no scented candle. You just wake up to the unmistakable sound of shouting and splashing. Outside, in the centre of the village, there's a large wooden tub the size of a beer barrel tipped on its side. It's steaming faintly, and lined up beside it are jugs of hot water, a pile of tattered linen rags, and villagers standing around like it's the opening act of a much-anticipated festival. Only instead of music, the entertainment is nudity and boiling grime. The tub itself has been dragged out from the storage hut where it's apparently kept in reverent filth all year. It creaks ominously as someone climbs in. An older man with hair like damp straw and a body carved entirely from elbows. He lowers himself in, groaning like a cathedral door. And the water instantly turns a shade that no one should bathe in voluntarily. He scrubs, people cheer, it's festive. You're handed a bar of soap, actually not so much handed as voluntold. The bar is gritty and beige and smells like old sheep. The woman who gives it to you grins and gestures toward the bath. You'll be third. You're third. You watch frozen as the man emerges, dripping and triumphant. He coughs, spits into the grass, and then dries off with a cloth that looks like it could legally qualify as a biohazard. The next bather, a teenage boy, climbs in. There's more cheering. You think you see something swim across the surface. You begin mentally negotiating with every deity you've ever heard of, including the ones from fantasy novels. And then it's your turn. No one offers you privacy, no screen, no curtain, just a bunch of amused faces and the vague smell of onions in the air. You remove your clothes slowly, cautiously, like someone undressing for a firing squad. When your tunic hits the ground with a wet flop, someone whistles. You don't look to see who, you just focus on survival. You climb in. The water is warm, which is a trap. At first it feels nice, comforting, even a little luxurious. But then your skin starts screaming in 12 languages as the water seeps into every blister, scrape and flea bite you've collected over the last few weeks. You sit there, trying not to breathe too deeply, trying not to think about the debris floating around you like tiny ghosts of failed hygiene. A woman hands you a rag. Behind the ears, love, that's where the devil hides. You scrub like your life depends on it. Your skin turns pink, then red. You're not sure if you're exfoliating or just erasing layers of yourself. When you lean back to rinse your hair, someone dumps a jug of cold water over your head, unannounced. You shriek, they laugh. Bath day is apparently equal parts cleanliness and comedy. By the time you crawl out of the tub, the water is a new shade of despair. You dry off with something that feels like old potato sack, then pull on your clothes, which now feel somehow filthier than before despite your recent defungusing. Still, the villagers beam at you, like you've just joined a sacred order. You smell less like doom, one man says kindly, slapping your back. You smile, but your shoulders are already twitching from the chill. The bath water is reused, by the way. That's the unspoken truth of bath day. One tub, one water source, multiple bodies. Some villagers go by age order, eldest first, others by social rank. This village seems to go by enthusiasm and elbow sharpness. Later, you're told that for many, Bath Day is tied to religious festivals. Pentecost, Christmas, Easter. Times when being clean somehow helps your soul shine brighter. But more often than not, it's just practicality. Heating that much water takes hours. It's a communal effort, a social one. Some folks even believe too much bathing is dangerous, that water opens your pores and lets disease sneak in, which makes you feel amazing about your situation. That evening, you're invited to sit around the fire with the freshly scrubbed crew. Everyone's glowing, or maybe just less dusty. They laugh more. Tell stories. One old man recounts the time someone fell asleep in the tub and was mistaken for a saint. Another insists that last year, a girl found a coin stuck to her thigh during the rinse-off. A sign, he says, a sign of wealth. Someone makes a joke about finding a frog this time. Everyone laughs, except you. You've already done the frog treatment. It wasn't funny. Historical fact, in medieval Europe, communal bathing wasn't uncommon, especially in towns with public bathhouses. But among rural communities, full-body bathing was infrequent due to the labour involved in heating water and social attitudes about cleanliness. Quirky fact, some people believe that excessive bathing could make you sick by opening up the pores and exposing your body to bad air. As a result, many opted for linen underclothes that absorbed sweat and were changed more often than the outer garments. Scholarly debate. While the myth of the filthy medieval peasant has been challenged, and evidence suggests some people bathed more than we assume, the frequency and methods of washing varied widely by region, class and access to clean water. You lie down that night feeling a strange lightness, not comfort, not freshness, but something like temporary neutrality. You're not clean, not really, but you're less unclean. And for now, that's enough. Osric the goose wanders by and takes a sniff. He blinks once, then waddles away. High praise. You don't get many chances to leave the village, but today is one of them. Word spreads in that peculiar medieval way, through a dozen overlapping conversations all happening at once, over bread, near cows, sometimes while arguing about firewood. The Lord's calling for volunteers, someone mutters. Castle's got a leak. Another claims it's about stolen chickens. Someone else swears the lady of the manor needs a new harp player, and you briefly consider lying about your musical skills. But by midday, it becomes clear. You and 5 others are heading to the local castle, if you can even call it that. It's not the towering stone fortress you see in fantasy movies. It's a motte and bailey structure, basically a wooden keep on a man-made hill, surrounded by a wooden fence and a muddy ditch pretending to be a moat. But still it looms. From your muddy field of firewood and goats it looks positively regal. The journey takes about an hour on foot, mostly uphill. You pass fields, hedgerows and the occasional rude goose, and the air smells cleaner the farther you get from the latrine zone. When the castle finally comes into view it's, well, underwhelming. Majestic in the way a tall shed is majestic. But to the villagers around you it's awe-inspiring. Home of the local lord, dispenser of justice, taxes, and occasionally leftover bread crusts. You gulp. This is like visiting the boss's office when you've never technically been hired. The guards at the gate look bored but well armed. One of them leans on a pike and stares at your group with the expression of a man who's seen too many toothless strangers in a day. Eventually, you're let in with a grunt. Inside, the air changes. Everything smells vaguely of roasted meat, damp stone, and something that might be mould or maybe just the smell of old money. A steward, narrow-faced, silk-sleeved and deeply unimpressed, waves you over. He informs you that your task is to help in the kitchens, patch the garden wall and not steal anything. You'll be watched, he adds, squinting directly at you. You nod, trying not to look like someone who would absolutely steal a single roasted chestnut if given the chance. First stop, the kitchens. They're a marvel of chaos. People scurry in every direction, chopping, stirring, yelling, sweating. Spits turn, slowly over open fires, dripping fat into the flames and making everything smell like heaven. You nearly weep at the sight of a boar's head being stuffed with onions and herbs. A man is plucking pheasants with terrifying speed, while another carves pies shaped like birds mid-flight. You're assigned to root duty, specifically scrubbing leaks. It's not glamorous, but you're close enough to the fire to stay warm and just far enough from the action to avoid being yelled at constantly. You overhear snippets of noble gossip from passing servants. The lady's hair caught fire last week, the youngest son refuses to eat unless the bread is shaped like a knight, and the lord himself hasn't bathed since Michaelmas. By late afternoon you're sent to the garden, where a crumbling stone wall needs shoring up. You learn quickly that medieval masonry involves a lot of guesswork, some cursing and the hope that gravity will be on your side. Your hands are scraped, your back hurts, and your face is covered in mortar dust. But no one accuses you of heresy or witchcraft, so you're calling this a win. Eventually the steward reappears and tells your group to wash up, relatively speaking, and prepare to serve at dinner. Yes, the dinner, the noble one. You're given a rag to wipe your face, told not to speak unless spoken to, and reminded again not to steal anything. Not even a fig, he warns. You file into the great hall through a side door. The space is dark but grand in its own rough way. High timber beams, long wooden tables, and rushes scattered across the floor. At the far end, raised on a small dais, sits the lord and his family. They wear colours, real colours, crimson, forest green, gold thread. You haven't seen that much dye since you spilled fruit beer on your tunic. The food is unreal! Roasted meats, stews thick with spices, loaves of bread still warm from the oven, apples glazed in honey. Trenchers made from fresh bread, not stale discs of culinary neglect. Your stomach groans in betrayal. You serve without incident mostly. You nearly drop a flagon of wine and someone grabs your arm just in time. The lord doesn't notice her. He's too busy gnawing on a turkey leg like it insulted him personally. His daughter sneezes directly into her stew. No one flinches. Once the nobles retire to their private rooms, plural, mind you, the servants descend like hungry wolves. The leftover food becomes fair game. You get half a pigeon wing and a scoop of lentils. Is the best thing you've tasted since waking up in this bizarre reality. That night, you're allowed to sleep in the outer hall. It's cold, draughty, and smells like gravy and wax, but it's quiet. You lie on your side, staring at the wooden rafters above. You've seen how the other half lives. It's not cleaner exactly, just better fed, more colour, more choices, more silk and fewer fleas. Historical fact, many early castles were made of wood before stone became the standard. Lords ruled over local peasants, managed land, dispensed justice, and collected taxes, all under the feudal system. Quirky fact, noble feasts were full of elaborate subtleties, edible centerpieces shaped like mythical creatures or scenes from stories made of sugar, marzipan, and meat. Think medieval edible dioramas. Scholarly debate. Some argue that the nobility was surprisingly disconnected from the daily lives of peasants, while others believe the relationship was more direct, with lords relying heavily on local labour and occasionally intervening in village disputes. You fall asleep wondering what it would take to stay in a castle. Marry a noble, save someone's life, steal a tunic and fake your way into court life, but mostly you just savour the feeling of a full stomach, and the fact that no chickens are pecking your feet. You're back in the village now, and the castle feels like a fever dream, something you imagined during a particularly vivid bout of hunger. There's no honey-glazed anything here, no silk, just smoke curling from crooked chimneys and the constant churn of mud underfoot. You wake to the sound of your own stomach demanding answers. It's been 2 days since the castle feast, and your body is still clinging to the memory of roast pigeon and warm bread like a jilted lover. Breakfast is a slap back to reality. Cold pottage, the consistency of soggy cardboard, scooped into your bowl with a generosity that somehow feels insulting. You eat it anyway, because not eating isn't really an option. Hunger in the medieval world isn't the stylish kind you brag about during a juice cleanse. It's the kind that frays your patience, dims your vision, and has you dreaming about butter with the same intensity modern people reserve for dream houses or exes. Food is a question mark here. Some days, there's a surplus of turnips and wild onions. Other days, there's just a faint hope that someone caught a rabbit, or remembered where they buried last season's pickled cabbage. You watch a woman crack open a storage jar, sniff the contents, then shrug and start ladling it into a pot. You don't ask. You've learned not to ask. Later in the day, someone announces a feast. The entire village perks up like a herd of startled deer. It's not a grand royal affair, obviously. It's a village gathering to mark the feast day of some saint whose name no one can agree on. But there's going to be meat. Real meat. Possibly even more than one kind. People begin preparing like it's Christmas, and the second coming rolled into one. You help with the setup, mostly because people work faster when they're picturing full bellies. Tables are fashioned from planks laid across barrels. Someone strings up faded flags. Children are tasked with gathering wild herbs, not for seasoning, but to make the place smell less like goats. By mid-afternoon, fires are lit. The women are elbow deep in pastry dough, and someone is roasting a whole pig on a spit. You nearly cry. Then comes the tricky part, eating without getting stabbed. Everyone's hungry, everyone's elbowing for space. When the food's finally served, it's chaos in wool. You wedge yourself between a boy with a wooden spoon and a man with only 3 teeth but incredible bite strength. The food is glorious. Trenchers soaked with stew, flatbread smeared with garlic paste, root vegetables roasted so long they taste like candy. There's even ale, mild, warm, and exactly what you need to wash down the flavour of accidental charcoal. For a few hours, the village feels different. Not rich, not clean, but alive in a way you haven't seen before. People sing. Someone plays a crude fiddle. A group of kids reenact a story about a saint defeating a dragon, and the dragon is clearly just a sheep with soot on its head. You laugh harder than you should, and then it ends. Not abruptly, but with that slow unravelling of joy that comes when you realise there's no more food and nothing left to distract from the cold. People trickle back to their huts. The fires burn low, plates are licked clean. Someone takes the last crust of bread and walks off like they've won a prize. You sit alone for a moment, staring at your hands, still sticky from the stew. This was a feast. But tomorrow it's back to boiled grain and praying for leftovers. There's no food preservation here beyond salting, drying, or hiding things in root cellars. Winter is a thief. It steals variety, joy, even calories. And if the harvest fails, hunger becomes starvation. You hear stories whispered around fires, families who boiled shoe leather, who dug through manure heaps for seeds, who turned on each other when the snow got too deep. You think about how much energy it takes just to feel full, about how every calorie here is a little miracle. There's no fridge to raid, no drive-through, no midnight snack unless you count the mould on the bread crust you hid behind the bed. Historical fact. Medieval feasts for commoners typically occurred on holy days or community celebrations, often featuring rare treats like meat or spiced dishes. Most days meals were frugal and repetitive, bread, pottage and ale. Quirky fact. Trenchers or edible plates made of stale bread soaked up food during the meal. These soggy discs were sometimes fed to the poor afterward, or to the dogs depending on the host's mood. Scholarly debate. Historians debate the quality of peasant diets. Some evidence suggests medieval peasants had access to more diverse and nutritious foods than once thought, while others emphasise the fragility of their diets during bad harvests or times of war. You walk home in the dark, the stew still sitting warm in your belly. There's a faint chill in the air, a warning that the season is shifting. Back inside, people are already curled up in their corners, the fire glowing low. You lie down on your straw mat, listening to the sound of someone quietly passing gas nearby. The glamour never lasts long. But tonight at least you're full. And in this world that's a rare kind of peace. You don't know exactly what you did. Maybe you said the wrong thing, maybe you stared too long at the fire, maybe it was that unfortunate comment about how you wished you had your phone. But something has shifted. People are looking at you differently now. Not suspiciously, but cautiously, like you're a loose chicken that might suddenly start speaking Latin. It starts with small things. A woman pulls her child away when you approach the well. A man mutters a prayer after you sneeze. Someone leaves a sprig of rosemary tied to your door latch. That last one might be meant as a blessing or a warning. You're not sure. Then one morning you wake to find a small bundle on your doorstep, a black feather, some knotted string and a piece of chalk. That's not breakfast. That's a message. You've been labelled. Maybe not officially, but definitely in the way that matters. People are whispering, not openly of course, just enough to make sure you hear them. Strange dreams lately, someone says too loudly near the hearth, and the cow's gone dry. That star was too bright last night. Saw him talking to a crow. And just like that, your existence is now a topic of spiritual concern. You try to lay low, but it's already too late. The village is primed for stories. All it takes is one person to say they knew something they shouldn't, and the fire spreads. You are already weird, your words too clean, your questions too frequent. And now that you're not dying of dysentery like a normal person, they're uneasy. The thing about witchcraft here is it isn't about pointy hats or potions, it's about unexplainables. Your presence or your odd habits, where you sometimes mutter things like, "Ugh, I need caffeine" when you're tired. To them you might as well be summoning demons. Your first official warning comes from Milda, the ancient woman you once thought was the local grandmother figure. She pulls you aside one day, her fingers like twigs, her breath warm with clove and root beer. "You've drawn notice," she says, not unkindly. "You walk like you're not from here. You see too much, talk strange." You try to explain that you're just different. She nods slowly. "Yes, that's the problem." There's a long pause, then she adds, "If I were you, I'd stop knowing things." That night, as you sit near the fire, someone tosses a bone into the flames and watches how it cracks. You realise they're doing it because of you, divining, trying to read your intentions in the smoke. You excuse yourself and go outside where the sky is cold and sharp with stars. You don't look up, not tonight. The next day, a small group of women corner you near the herb garden. "What do you know of healing?" one asks, arms folded. "Heard you mended your own fever with frog charms?" Another nods. "Heard you made the leeches sing." You fumble. "I just rested. Drank some water." "Witches brew," one of them whispers. It's not an accusation, not yet, but it wants to be. Later you overhear someone say that the last person accused of witchery was a man who read too much and had a crooked toe. He was drowned in the river, but gently, they add, like that somehow softens it. You start watching your own behaviour. You don't speak unless spoken to. You nod more. You pretend you're just another nobody stirring soup or mending thatched roofs. You stop using words like science. You stop asking about stars. You bury the tiny compass you made from a sliver of metal and a leaf because it floated a little too well and gave the blacksmith's wife a nosebleed. Of course, your fear only makes you look more suspicious. And then comes the church again. Father Merrick returns to the village, this time with a scribe and a cart of scrolls. He preaches fire and repentance in the square, reminding everyone that sin walks among them, that the devil prefers soft steps and friendly faces. His eyes land on you once, twice. The sermon ends, and he begins pulling people aside, quiet talks, notes in a ledger. You keep your head down, fingers clenched tight. A child points at you and says, "They sleep funny." That's all it takes. The scribe makes a mark on his parchment. You're summoned. You stand before Father Merrick and his blank-faced assistant in the cold morning air. He asks simple questions. What do you believe? Have you ever cursed someone? Do you dream in colour? You answer carefully, truthfully, neutrally. You're dismissed without vow and ceremony, but the damage is done. Now people don't just avoid you, they watch you, with narrowed eyes and twitching fingers, just waiting for a reason. Historical fact. In medieval Europe, belief in witchcraft was widespread, especially during times of social stress or unexplained hardship. Accusations often began with simple rumours and could escalate quickly. Quirky fact, one actual test used to identify witches was the pricking test, where suspects were stabbed with a needle to find the witch's mark, a spot that wouldn't bleed or hurt. Basically a medieval excuse to stab someone repeatedly. Scholarly debate. Some scholars argue that accusations of witchcraft were often tied to social tensions. Women who lived alone, healers, or anyone who disrupted the established order were at risk. Others point to religious zeal and centralised control as key drivers. That night you don't sleep. You lie still, fully clothed, hands folded over your chest like you're already halfway to the grave. You hear whispers across the room, feel eyes in the dark. Even the fire seems cautious. You're still here, still surviving. But now, every word, every glance, every sneeze feels like it could tip the balance. You don't have magic, but you might need some. Romance in the medieval world hits a little different. Less star-crossed lovers and handwritten poetry, more livestock negotiations and parents elbow deep in your relationship before you even realise you're in one. And yet, despite the mud, the manual labour, the constant threat of boils, and the zero sense of personal hygiene, people still manage to fall in love. Or at least get married. Or at least wind up stuck together by a shared debt and an ox. You're not looking for romance, obviously. You're just trying to not get burned at the stake. But that doesn't stop the village from noticing you. You've survived a fever, washed in the sacred filth of Bath Day, and managed to avoid eye contact with Father Merrick on 3 separate occasions. In their eyes, that makes you both mysterious and oddly durable. The eligible few have begun to circle. It starts innocently enough. A girl offers you a slice of dried apple, sweet, tart, and vaguely sticky with pocket lint. She giggles when you accept it. "Best I've got," she says. Then, as she walks away, she casually adds, "Dar says I come with 1 sheep and a comb." You freeze. The next day, you're approached by a boy with shaggy hair and a pronounced limp. He smiles shyly and asks if you've ever helped catch ducks by moonlight. You tell him no. He grins wider and says, "You should, it's romantic." Then he winks and limps off before you can ask a single follow-up question. You are now, apparently, part of the local dating pool. Someone explains later that courtship here is less about flirtation and more about timing. Families need alliances, dowries, extra hands for work. Love is optional, land is forever. Marriages are usually arranged by parents, confirmed by a handshake and sealed with ale at the next market day. If you're lucky, the person you marry has most of their teeth and doesn't smell like boiled moss. Still, there are traditions. Courtship tokens are a thing. People exchange gifts, a sprig of rosemary, a ribbon, or if they're really serious, a hand-carved spoon. One morning you find just such a spoon on your doorstep. It's lopsided and slightly singed, but it's undeniably heartfelt. You don't know who left it. You ask around. 3 people blush. 2 deny everything. 1 just stares at you and says, "Spoons are you then walks away. There's also singing. Bad singing. Off-key, nasal and passionate. Late one night, a voice floats through your window, warbling something about stars and barley and your face like warm butter. You sit frozen, unsure whether to respond or pretend to be dead. The next morning, a different villager claims they were the one serenaded, not you. The entire hut spends breakfast arguing over who has the most butter-like face. And then there's the accident. You're helping repair a fence when a man approaches, a solidly built guy with impressive sideburns and a permanent squint. He offers you a cup of warm beer and makes small talk about pigs. You nod politely. Then he says, "So we're courting now, are we?" You spit beer across the fence. He looks hurt. You accepted the mug. It's tradition. Apparently accepting a drink, a trinket, or even prolonged eye contact can be considered an informal betrothal. You scramble to clarify that you're just friendly. He sighs. "Tell my aunt that. She's already sewing the wedding cloak." He pats your arm, shakes his head, and walks away, muttering, "Always happens with the mysterious ones." You are now being subtly shunned by 3 people and pursued by 2 others. Every glance is interpreted, every smile a contract. At one point, a woman offers you an egg and you panic, tossing it over your shoulder like it's a live grenade. One afternoon, you're invited, more like drafted, to attend a village handfasting. It's a pre-marriage ritual, usually held when 2 people intend to marry but haven't officially sealed the deal. They stand before the elder, hands bound with ribbon or twine, and exchange vows that basically say, "We'll give this a year and see if we still like each other." It's halfway between a wedding and a very public trial period. You watch the couple, a boy with a tooth gap and a girl with an enviable braid, grip hands while the elder recites words about fertility, shared labour, and mutual toleration. They both look nervous but weirdly calm, like 2 people walking into the same very drafty future. There's music afterward, clapping, a pie shaped like a chicken, and several jokes about bedding rituals that make your ears turn pink. You learn that consummation matters, like, legally. A marriage isn't valid until it's complete, and sometimes there's even a witness to prove it. Not in the room, thank goodness. Just nearby, with ears pressed to the wall and a candle to wave once they hear the right noises. Romance lives here in the spaces between awkward laughter and contractual obligation. Historical fact, medieval marriages, particularly among peasants, were often arranged informally. Consent from both parties was technically required by church law, but family pressure and social expectations played a massive role. Quirky fact, handfasting, binding a couple's hands together, was a common engagement ritual. In some areas, couples were considered legally married for a year and a day before deciding whether to formalize it. Scholarly debate. Historians disagree about how much personal choice peasants truly had in choosing partners. Some evidence shows high levels of parental control, while other records suggest individual agency and even elopement were more common than once believed. You lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling, pondering your current relationship status. You've unintentionally proposed, possibly accepted a spoon, and rejected 3 eggs and a beetroot with unknown romantic intent. The straw pokes your shoulder. A goat chews its cud beside you. Somewhere out there, someone's carving another spoon. You're not looking for love, but love, apparently, is looking for you. So you've had a taste of the romantic market, the pottage market, and the livestock market of rural medieval life. But now you get it into your head, perhaps because you've had just enough sleep or not nearly enough. These it might be time to explore beyond the village, maybe to find answers or food, or just a little peace and quiet. That's cute, because travel in this time period isn't so much an activity as it is an ordeal, a gamble, a very muddy, uncomfortable, often fatal gamble. But sure, you want to go for a walk. The first problem is that no one really leaves, like ever. When you start asking about nearby towns, people look at you like you just declared yourself king of the sheep. Why, they ask. Not suspiciously, just confused. The idea that you'd voluntarily step outside the known world is genuinely baffling. Travel is for merchants, soldiers, and exiles. Everyone else stays put and lets the weather come to them. Still, you're persistent. You convince a young shepherd, Tobin, barely 15 and eternally chewing on something, to lend you a rough map. It's not much. More of a drawing, really. It shows your village, a squiggly line for the river, a forest with some ominous symbols in it, and what looks like a pair of buttocks labelled Bristol. You decide that must be Bristol, or a warning. Either way, it's something. You pack light. A heel of bread, a piece of cheese so hard it could shatter windows, and a skin of small beer. You borrow a walking stick from a man who insists it's magical. It's not, it's just particularly knobby. Then you step out of the village, feeling dramatic and brave. 20 minutes later you're sweating, limping, and already regretting everything. The path is barely a path. It's more of a hopeful groove through bramble and mud, occasionally vanishing entirely. The land undulates in frustrating little hills. The trees lean too close, like they're gossiping about your poor footwear. Birds shriek warnings you can't understand. Every twig snap sounds suspiciously like a footstep. You keep moving. After an hour you pass another village, or rather, what's left of one. Charred beams, collapsed roofs, a sign half buried in weeds. No people, just silence. You wonder if it was raided, or if the plague rolled through. Maybe both. You don't linger. Around midday you sit under a tree to eat. The bread breaks your tooth. The cheese fights back. You drink the beer and try not to think about how much longer the sun will stay up. Because travel here isn't just hard, it's slow. You're averaging maybe 2 miles per hour if you're lucky, which means you've gone 6 miles and feel like you've survived a war. Later, you run into a traveller. A real one. He's pulling a cart full of rags and bones, pulled by a mule that looks more ghost than animal. The man himself is draped in cloaks, missing half his teeth, and carrying a staff with bits of string and shell tied to it. You nod. He nods back. "You're headed wrong," he says without prompting. You blink. "Where should I be going?" "Back." Helpful. You ask him about the forest up ahead. He shrugs. "It's old, got wolves or monks or witches. Depends who you ask." You laugh nervously. "Which one's worse?" He thinks for a moment. "Wolves eat quicker." By sunset, you realise you've barely gone 10 miles. You've tripped 5 times, bled twice, and been chased by something that might have been a very angry goose. You need shelter. You spot a half-collapsed barn and shuffle inside, curling up in the hay. It's damp and possibly haunted, but it beats freezing to death under a hedge. Sleep doesn't come easy, not with every sound amplified in the dark. A twig snap, an owl hoot, something snuffling at the door. You keep your stick nearby and try not to think about all the murder ballads you've heard back in the village. The next morning you push on. You follow the river, step over fallen trees, and dodge what you swear is a cursed rock. Eventually you make it to a small town, a real one. Stone buildings, a church, a tavern, even a smithy that doesn't double as someone's kitchen. You approach, ready to ask for directions, maybe some water, and someone immediately yells, "Halt!" 2 guards approach. They're wearing leather caps and holding spears that look like they have been mostly used to poke stubborn cows. Still you freeze. They ask where you're from, who sent you, and whether you're carrying disease, heresy, or both. You mention your village and instantly regret it. They share a glance, then escort you to a small hut outside the town. "You'll wait here," one says, "till the reeve says you're safe." You wait. And wait. No one brings food. A rat tries to share your cloak. When the reeve finally arrives, a man with suspiciously clean shoes, he waves you in, asks a few half-hearted questions, then declares you unnecessary. You leave with bruised pride and a stronger understanding of how insular these communities are. Outsiders are tolerated at best, feared at worst. Unless you're carrying trade goods or holy relics, you're just another body taking up space. Historical fact, travel in medieval Europe was slow, dangerous, and often required official permission. Roads were unmarked and rarely maintained, and lone travellers were especially vulnerable to robbery or worse. Quirky fact, medieval travellers sometimes carried safe conduct documents, letters proving they had permission to move between regions. These were often written in Latin and sealed with wax. Scholarly debate. Some historians argue that travel was more common than previously thought, especially for merchants, clergy and pilgrims. Others emphasise the risks and logistical hurdles that made most people stay close to home. You return to your village a few days later, exhausted, sore, and about 7 pounds lighter. No one makes a big deal of it. Someone asks if you found any good sticks. Another wonders if your shoes are cursed now. You nod, lie down, and swear never to leave again. At least not without a horse, a sword, and about 6 more cheeses. The sun sets, but the village doesn't fall silent. Not tonight. There's a buzz in the air, subtle but persistent, like the faint tingle of static right before a lightning strike. You hear it in the way people shuffle toward the square after supper, in the children whispering excitedly behind firewood stacks, in the deep laughter of someone already a few gulps into a warm flat ale. It's not a religious feast this time or a wedding. It's something more primal. Tonight, the village is putting on a show. Entertainment in the medieval world is rare, treasured, and often very, very strange. There's no Netflix queue, no music streaming, no curated list of top 10 comedies featuring goats. Instead, when the need for distraction bubbles high enough, the villagers make their own fun. And tonight, they are going full production mode. You follow the crowd, curious and slightly hopeful that whatever's about to happen doesn't involve mud wrestling or public leeching. The square is lit with smoky torches jammed into the ground. The smell of burning pitch and rotting wood mixes with the scent of boiled turnips. Someone's always boiling turnips. A few benches have been dragged out, though most people just squat or lean on barrels. Someone passes around a clay jug of beer, and it ends up in your hands. You sip. It tastes like disappointment mixed with barley, but it warms you. A shriek rings out. Fake. Theatrical. Everyone claps. A man in motley steps into the torchlight, jingling as he moves. He's wearing a patchwork tunic, a fool's cap with 2 sad bells, and a grin that could curdle milk. The jester has arrived. He twirls, bows, and immediately launches into a monologue about the reeve's missing boots, the blacksmith's wife's goat-like laugh, and the holy virtue of the baker's daughter, who slaps him with a crusty loaf from the audience. Everyone roars. He flops backward in mock pain, then cartwheels, badly, into the pig pen. The pigs are not amused. Next come the players, a group of 5 villagers dressed in costumes that are more suggestion than disguise. One wears a burlap sack with eye holes, another has a crown made of straw. They're putting on a mystery play, a dramatised Bible story, but with all the subtlety of a frying pan to the face. Tonight's theme, the prodigal son, but reimagined with turnips, a devil in wool socks, and the town drunk cast as the wise father. It's beautiful chaos. You watch as the devil dances through the scene, farting loudly to signal sin, and the audience howls. A child throws a radish at him. Someone in the back yells, "Repent, you goat-faced villain!" The actors break character twice to argue about whose line is next, then resume as if nothing happened. You're laughing too, genuinely. For the first time in weeks, your face isn't twisted in worry or effort. There's something comforting in the absurdity, in the shared joy. Even Father Merrick, grim as ever, stands in the shadows with a faint, reluctant smile. After the play ends, amid applause and scattered vegetables, the jester returns. He announces a farting contest. You're certain he's joking until 3 burly men step forward with absolute seriousness and begin competing. There's cheering, there's judgment, there's a victor crowned with a turnip. Then the music starts. A fiddler, a drummer, and someone with a whistle that's mostly just a carved reed take their places and start up a tune. It's fast, uneven, and impossible not to move to. People begin dancing, not elegant waltzing, but this kind of stomping, spinning, wild-limbed dance that looks like it's halfway to an exorcism. You're pulled into the mix before you can resist. You don't know the steps. No one does. That's the point. The girl with the enviable braid grabs your hand and spins you so fast your feet leave the ground. You stumble, laugh, and nearly collide with a man who twirls a bucket over his head like it's choreography. Someone claps in time. Someone else definitely twists an ankle. It doesn't matter. For hours, the music and movement continue. No one counts time. No one cares how off-key the whistle becomes. At one point, the jester returns and improvises a dance with a chicken, which may or may not be part of the act. Eventually, when legs give out and the beer runs dry, people collapse into soft piles of each other, the laughter trailing off into exhausted silence. You sit on a barrel, sweat cooling on your neck, the torchlight flickering over faces still glowing with joy. The world hasn't changed. There's still famine, plague, and petty feuds, but tonight, none of it matters. Tonight, the village reminded itself what it feels like to be a village. Historical fact. Mystery plays were popular forms of religious entertainment in medieval Europe, dramatising biblical stories with humour, song, and theatrical flourishes. They were often performed by local guilds or villagers during feast days. Quirky fact, flatulence contests, bawdy jokes, and physical comedy were surprisingly common in medieval performances, especially by jesters. Fart jokes, truly the oldest form of humour. Scholarly debate. Some historians view medieval peasant entertainment as escapist and deeply communal, providing relief from hard lives. Others suggest it reinforced social and religious norms through satire and storytelling. The torches sputter out one by one. You rise stiffly, the soles of your feet aching, your ribs sore from laughing. Someone hums the tune from earlier as they stumble home. You walk back to the hut with a smile, past sleeping chickens and overturned mugs. In a world ruled by survival, nights like this are rare gold. And for once, your dreams will be weird for the right reasons. The next morning starts off quiet, unnervingly so. No rooster crowing, no wood being chopped, just a kind of low hum beneath everything, like the ground itself is holding its breath. You sit up on your haymat and immediately sense something's wrong. People are whispering, avoiding eye contact. A child walks by the hut carrying a duck under one arm and a wide, frightened stare. You glance at your hutmates. No one says it, but you all feel it. Something's about to go down. And then the bell rings. Not the church bell, the other one. The one that's only used when someone's gone missing, or when a pig births something with two heads, or when it's time for justice. You step outside and see the whole village moving toward the square in that reluctant, sluggish way people move when they know they're about to witness something unpleasant. Father Merrick is already there, standing straight and grim beside a makeshift wooden table covered in various instruments. None of them are spoons. The accused is already bound, someone you barely know, a thin man, quiet, always kept to himself, a leather worker or maybe a charcoal burner. The village is small, but not small enough that you know everyone's backstory. His face is pale, his lips pinched white with fear. You don't even know what he's accused of yet. The reeve clears his throat. He stole eggs from the church storehouse, he says. 2, possibly 3. You blink. That's it. You've stepped on more than 3 eggs since arriving. The crowd murmurs, half in agreement, half in discomfort. Then someone shouts, "What else has he stolen?" And that's when it starts unravelling. "Last month my best rooster vanished. My daughter says he muttered something strange when he passed her. He walks in the woods too long. That last one hits differently. You realise you've heard it before, you've felt it before. But it's not about the eggs. It never is." Merrick raises a hand and the crowd quiets. "We must test him," he says, "for the truth lies not in words but in the ways of the flesh." He gestures, and the man is brought to a barrel of water, cold, filthy, and surrounded by expectant eyes. You recognise the setup immediately, trial by ordeal. They bind his hands and ankles and lower him into the water. The logic, if you can call it that, is simple. If he sinks, he's innocent. If he floats, he's guilty. Because water, being pure, rejects evil, is the kind of thinking that makes you want to scream into a pillow. They dunk him. He struggles. Bubbles rise. You watch, jaw clenched, every part of you screaming silently. Finally, after what for feels like too long, they drag him up. "He floated," someone says. No, he didn't. He twitched. He's guilty. The man gasped for breath, eyes wild with panic, water dripping from his nose and mouth. It doesn't matter. The crowd has decided. The reeve declares he'll be punished. Stocks for a week, no food, and 3 lashes a day. The man whimpers, but no one helps him. The villagers shuffle away, already processing the next part of the day. Ploughing, washing, trying not to become the next one dragged to the barrel. You stand there frozen, because now you know how it works. Guilt isn't about truth. It's about timing, suspicion, and how nervous you look in a crowd. Later that afternoon, the stocks are dragged into place in the centre of the village. 2 holes for hands, 1 for the head, and no dignity left in between. The man is locked in, face downcast, and people begin to pass by. Some throw rotten apples, some just stare. A boy draws a picture in the dirt beneath his feet. It looks like a devil with long legs. You feel sick. You ask one of the older villagers, "Has anyone ever passed one of those trials?" She shrugs. "I think once, old woman. Floated like a feather, but she sang a hymn the whole time and didn't cough. They called it a miracle, gave her a chicken." You stare. "And what happened to her?" She squints at you. "Oh, she died of fever 2 days later. The chicken too." Perfect. But the worst is yet to come. You hear talk of the duck. At first you think it's a joke, one of the jester's leftover gags. But no, it's real. The duck is part of a local ordeal tradition, mostly reserved for witchcraft trials. They call it weighing the soul. Here's how it works. If the accused can hold a duck on their head without it flying away or defecating, they're innocent. If the duck flees or poops, well, the devil's clearly involved. You don't believe it until you see it. Late in the day, after the stocks, a second man is accused. This time of making a cow miscarry by whistling at it. Father Merrick insists on the duck. The girl brings it forward solemnly. It's a large white duck with pink feet and a vague air of superiority. It's placed on the man's head. Everyone watches. The duck does nothing. It just sits there, blinking. The crowd shifts uneasily. Finally, the duck opens its beak, lets out a warbling honk, and flaps away. The man is immediately declared guilty. That's it. Duck verdict. Historical fact. Trial by ordeal was a common method of determining guilt during the medieval period. These included ordeals by fire, water, or combat. While officially banned by the church in the 13th century, local variations persisted for centuries. Quirky fact, there were actual cases, especially in Europe's rural corners, of animals being used in trials. Pigs, dogs, even insects were sometimes tried for crimes based on local superstition and legal precedent. Scholarly debate. Historians continue to debate how seriously people took these rituals. Some argue they were symbolic, with outcomes quietly rigged by community leaders. Others believe these ordeals were deeply sincere, shaped by genuine belief in divine justice. That night the square is quiet again. The man in the stocks moans softly. The duck is back in its pen, cleaning itself with complete indifference. And you're starting to understand that in this time truth bends under fear. Justice isn't blind, it's just nearsighted, half-drunk, and holding a duck. You lie awake, rehearsing answers, practicing neutrality, hoping your own trial doesn't come down to poultry. You can feel it in the air, thick, electric, like the sky is bracing for something heavy. It's not a storm, at least not the weather kind. It's in the way people move, the way they mutter, the way they stop talking entirely when Father Merrick walks past. Something is building, something old and inevitable, like hunger or fire. It starts with taxes. The Lord has sent word, delivered by a bored-looking squire on a sleek horse that probably eats better than half the village. The message is simple. The harvest was lean, but the Lord's expenses were not. He wants more. From everyone. Immediately. You hear the murmurs before you read the message yourself. Well, not read. It's read to everyone. Out loud by the reeve, who stammers through the Latin phrases with all the ceremony of a man chewing raw onion. The numbers are cruel. Rents are up. Tithes are up. Grain owed, chickens owed, labour owed. And anyone who's behind, they'll owe extra. There's a pause afterward. A long, thick silence. Then someone spits on the ground. That's how it begins. At first it's just talk. In corners, behind barns, during firewood runs and sheep counts, whispers and what-ifs. No one says the word revolt out loud, but it floats around the village like smoke. You hear it in phrases like, "If only we had more pitchforks," or "What's one lord against 20 men with shovels?" The logic isn't airtight, but the anger is solid. You're not sure what side you're on. You're a visitor in this mess. But when you see a mother give her child the last spoonful of cold barley mash, while her own stomach growls loud enough to startle the chickens, you start leaning. One evening, you find yourself walking with Tobin, the shepherd boy with a limp and a heart 3 sizes too large for this century. He tells you quietly, "My uncle's got an axe he don't use no more. Says I can have it, just in case." "In case of what?" you ask. Tobin shrugs. "In case we remember we've got hands." That night there's a meeting in the woods, not far, just beyond the edge of the trees where the firelight won't catch. You weren't invited, but no one stops you. You sit on a log and listen as the older men speak in low, careful voices. They're not wild-eyed or drunk on dreams, they're tired, furious, and out of patience. They talk about the taxes, yes, but also the church's grip, the reeve's endless demands, the new mill fee, the constant fear. "We break our backs and starve so they can sit in velvet," someone mutters. "They don't even know our names." Another man, face half-lit by torchlight, clenches his jaw. "We don't need to kill nobody. Just take the grain back. Burn the account books. Show 'em we're not animals." A woman speaks next. Widowed, grey-haired, sharper than flint. "If they want war, let them come for it. But we'll meet 'em with something more than bowed heads." You're quiet. Listening. Watching. Somewhere between a chronicler and a coward. The next morning, the Reeves cart is overturned in the road. Chickens scatter. A pile of parchment lies burning beside it. No one claims responsibility. No one even mentions it. But the Lord does. By evening, another messenger arrives. This one less bored and more armoured. He demands names, threatens stocks, mumbles something about collective punishment. He rides off with no answers, only glares. Tension thickens. More people sharpen tools. Not openly, but you hear the scrape of metal against stone more often. Children are told to stay close. Men walk in pairs. Even Merrick starts preaching louder, more frantically. "Obedience is God's will," he cries. "To resist your Lord is to resist the divine order." But fewer people kneel during his sermons. Then comes the final spark. A boy, you don't know him well, tries to take back a sack of grain seized by the Reeves' assistant. He's caught, beaten, left outside the church tied to a post with his shirt torn and a bloody cloth over his eye. The entire village sees it. No one speaks, but every jaw clenches. That night the pitchforks come out. No battle cries, no banners, just quiet movement. A dozen men and women with farm tools and torches march toward the Reeves house. You follow, half in shock, half in grim awe. The house burns quickly. Thatched roofs are terrible at fire safety. The Reeve escapes barely, pantsless and screaming. No one chases him. Instead, they gather in the square. Someone rings the bell, not for warning this time, but for victory. People cheer, quietly but from the gut. It's the first taste of real power they've had in years, maybe ever. But it won't last. The Lord will hear. He'll send men, real soldiers, with swords and orders and no patience for peasant rebellion. And everyone here knows it. So they don't celebrate for long. They hide the weapons, douse the feuds, send scouts down the road. Return to their lives as if nothing happened. But something has happened, and nothing will quite be the same. Historical fact, peasant revolts occurred throughout medieval Europe, especially during times of famine, heavy taxation, and war. One of the most famous was the English Peasants' Revolt of 1381, sparked by poll taxes and oppressive feudal obligations. Quirky fact, some revolts included official grievance lists written in Latin, or rhyming verse, because if you're going to rise up against your oppressors, you might as well be poetic about it. Scholarly debate. While some historians see these uprisings as spontaneous, others argue they were carefully coordinated and part of a long build-up of systemic exploitation, religious tension, and the erosion of traditional rights. You lie down that night, still fully clothed, heart beating a little too fast. Outside, the square is dark again, but the silence feels different, like the ground is still humming, like the village has remembered it can fight, and now it waits for whatever comes next. It begins with a smell. You wake to it creeping into your nose, sour, metallic like spoiled wine and rotting garlic. It's thick and unfamiliar, even in a world already rich with questionable odours. You roll over in your straw, hoping it's just someone boiling a particularly evil cabbage. But then you hear it. A coughing fit so violent it sounds like someone trying to reverse swallow their lungs. You sit up fast, and your body already knows. Something's wrong. Not wrong like the cows broke loose again or the pig got into the butter. No, this is capital W wrong. By mid-morning the village is different, quieter. The usual buzz of scraping, shoveling, barking and bickering has dulled into whispers and closed shutters. You see a woman slumped on a stool outside her door, wrapped in a blanket even though the sun is warm. Her skin looks grey. Her eyes barely register you. You nod, unsure what else to do, and she doesn't nod back. After the bell rings, but this time it's not for church, it's a signal. A warning. Plague. The word moves through the village faster than a fire in dry thatch. No one says it loudly, but everyone says it. In corners, behind hands, muttered into sleeves. It's here, they say. The pestilence. The black breath. God's judgment. Some say it started in the next village over. Others blame a travelling tinker who passed through 2 nights ago. One man swears it came in on a crow. Everyone has a theory. None of them matter. The first confirmed death comes at sundown. A boy, barely 10. His mother screams until she collapses. The reeve sends someone to cover the body with a shroud and burn the bedding. Father Merrick appears not long after, face pale and drawn, already whispering prayers faster than breath. People start barricading their doors. The sick are moved into a single house near the edge of the village, the pest house, hastily designated by consensus and dread. You help carry someone there, wrapped in blankets, her face glossy with sweat and her breath short like she's always just finished running. Her hands are swollen, her armpits lumpy with dark bruises that weren't there yesterday. You've read about this, you know what this is, and it's terrifying to watch it happen in real time. Within 2 days, the pest house is full. Within 4, another one is needed. You lose count of the dead. People stop talking in numbers. It becomes just names now. Elder. Thomas. The blacksmith's wife. You see smoke more often than usual. Quiet pyres outside the village. No one rings the bell anymore. It's always ringing in your mind. Griselda, the herbalist, works tirelessly. She brews teas, mixes poultices, hangs bundles of sage and lavender in every doorway. She crushes juniper berries and shoves them into the cloth to tie around mouths. Sweet scents drive out evil, she says. You do it. Not because you believe it'll work, but because doing something feels better than watching the world rot. Father Merrick declares that sin brought the plague. He walks barefoot through the village, lashing himself with a switch, urging others to repent. Some join him, others lock their doors tighter. You see more crosses drawn in ash on doors, more eyes red with fear. The well becomes a contested zone. No one wants to draw from it, but everyone has to. Some people start boiling water. What a luxury to have enough fuel for that. Others just cover the bucket with a cloth and hope. You stop drinking deeply, or you eat less, you sleep less, you start helping with the dead. Not by choice, you're just around. And people need help. Wrapping bodies, digging holes, saying a few shady words over them before piling dirt high. The bodies don't look like people, they look like grief with skin. And yet you help. Because someone has to. Because no one else wants to. One night, you find Tobin sitting outside the hut, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes red. "My aunt's gone," he says. "She was fine yesterday." You sit beside him. He leans his head on your shoulder like a child, and neither of you says anything for a long time. By the 10th day, the village feels like a shadow. Maybe a third of the population is gone. The rest walk like ghosts, hollow-eyed and twitchy. You stop seeing chickens. Even the pigs seem subdued. There's no laughter, no jester, just coughs, cries, and the shoveling of earth. Griselda finally breaks. You find her in her hut, eyes wild, muttering over herbs and praying in a mixture of Latin and gibberish. "It's not natural," she says. "It's not just sickness. It's the rot beneath us. It's the bones in the land." You don't know what to say. You just sit with her, making tea out of anything that smells less like death. Historical fact. The Black Death swept through Europe in waves from the mid-14th century onward, killing an estimated 30-60% of the population in some areas. Entire villages were wiped out. and social order collapsed in many regions. Quirky fact, plague doctors wore bird-like masks filled with fragrant herbs, believing the sweet smell would protect them from bad air, or miasma, which was thought to cause disease. Scholarly debate. While the traditional view blames the bubonic plague, caused by Yersinia pestis, some researchers argue the symptoms described in medieval texts suggest a viral hemorrhagic fever, or a different, now extinct strain. The true nature of the Black Death remains a mystery. Eventually the dying slows, the coughs get quieter, the pyres burn less frequently, but the silence doesn't bring comfort. It just reveals how much is gone, who is gone. You walk through the square, empty save for crows and scraps. The wind whistles through the bones of the village. You stop by the pest house, now eerily quiet. A chicken clucks nearby. You survived. But the village is smaller now, and somehow the world feels larger. It's the first snowfall that finally breaks the silence. No one says a word when the flurries begin, just light wisps at first, barely brushing the ground. But they keep falling, and by nightfall the earth has vanished beneath a slow white tide. The village, already quiet from the plague, falls deeper into stillness. And just like that, you've entered medieval winter. Not the festive, snow-globe version, but the real kind. Long, cold, and teeth-bitingly cruel. The kind that separates those who planned from those who just hoped. You weren't here for the harvest, but you see the aftermath now. The barns are half full at best. The root cellar is damp and smells vaguely of mildew. The cured meat is already rationed with military precision. Every loaf is thinner, every stew more water than substance. There's no margin for error. You're living on a knife's edge, and that knife is made of turnips and frost. The mornings are brutal. You wake to ice on the inside of the walls, breath fogging the air before you've even sat up. Your straw bedding is stiff, brittle with cold. Sometimes your boots freeze to the floor, and that's if you're lucky enough to have boots. You've taken to wrapping rags around your feet before bed and stuffing them under your tunic. You look like a scarecrow's ghost. Firewood is currency now. People eye their neighbours' piles with quiet desperation. There are whispers about someone stealing kindling from behind the smithy. Another claims she saw a man burning dried animal dung and pretending it was holy smoke. You don't blame him. During the day, you work to keep warm. You help haul buckets of snow to melt for water, break ice from the stream with a rock, chop firewood until your arms go numb. Every chore becomes a survival task. At night, you huddle in a bundle of scratchy cloaks near the hearth, if you can get a spot close enough. There's a new hierarchy based entirely on proximities to the fire. Food is a delicate negotiation. Meals are no longer what's for dinner, but is there anything left? You eat dried peas that crunch like gravel, a smear of lard on bread so stale it sounds hollow when you knock on it, and occasionally a spoonful of salt pork so salty it feels medicinal. The communal pot is always on the fire now, but what's in it varies. Cabbage, water and hope mostly. People start changing under winter's grip. Conversations get shorter. Laughter dries up. You notice small rituals forming, people touching the doorframe before stepping outside, crossing themselves before lighting the fire, whispering thanks to no one before biting into a sliver of turnip. Hunger makes everyone superstitious. One woman, Ida, the one who gave you that dried apple weeks ago, starts offering charms for sale. Strings of bones, little bundles of herbs, bits of stone she claims keep death at bay. She sets up a corner in the square, calls it Winter's Mercy. You scoff the first time you see it. By the third week, you're tying one of her charms around your neck like everyone else. The worst days are the ones where the snow comes sideways, ice in the wind needles on your skin. Those are no fire days, not because people don't want fire, but because the wind steals the heat as soon as it rises. You sit wrapped in 3 layers of damp wool, hands tucked in your armpits, trying to breathe slowly enough not to shiver yourself into unconsciousness. One morning you wake up to a dead chicken in the corner, not eaten, just frozen stiff, its little beak open mid-cluck. You pick it up carefully and set it outside. No one says anything, it's just another casualty. The animals, once warmth and life, are now just extra mouths. Tobin loses his remaining sheep to the cold. You help him bury them under snow because the ground's too hard to dig. He cries silently, the kind of crying that leaks from the corners of your eyes without changing your face. Later you catch him chewing on a strip of hide. You don't stop him. The cold creates strange sounds. Trees groan, ice cracks like gunfire. One night, the roof of the grain store collapses under the weight of snow. No one goes to fix it. There's nothing inside worth saving. Then there's the hunger hallucinations. You swear you see a roast goose in the firelight once. A woman's laugh sounds like the popping of chestnuts. You catch yourself sniffing your own sleeve because it vaguely reminds you of garlic. You're not proud of that. Still, there are moments of beauty. The snow at dawn untouched, like a sheet over the earth. Icicles catching sunlight. The silence, heavy, yes, but peaceful in its own way. You notice the stars more. They seem sharper, colder, as if the sky itself has grown brittle. You start keeping count in your head. How many days since the snow first fell, how many meals you've eaten, how many times you've heard someone cry in the dark, how many people haven't come out of their homes. The number rises. One morning someone lights a small bonfire in the square, not for warmth, but as a signal. We're still here, it says. We're still trying. People gather, stretch out their fingers, tell quiet stories. You hear one about a man who survived an entire winter on boiled leather and dried moss. He lost all his teeth but lived to 90. Someone else laughs. You join them. Historical fact. Winter was often the deadliest season in medieval Europe. With food stores dwindling, little fresh produce and no modern insulation, even well-prepared households faced starvation or illness before spring returned. Quirky fact, some people hung onions or garlic from beams to ward off winter spirits or bad luck. Others placed iron nails near doorways to trap the cold as it entered the home. Part superstition, part a coping mechanism. Scholarly debate. Historians discuss the severity of winter impacts depending on region and social status. Some argue peasant communities had tight-knit support systems to share resources. Others highlight how famine and cold often led to abandonment and despair. By the time the snow finally starts to melt, it doesn't feel like a relief. Not yet. Just another phase. The mud is coming, the sickness, the spoiled food hidden under melting drifts. But you made it this far, you're still breathing, still standing, and in this century that's everything. It's just after the thaw when he arrives, wrapped in layers of brown wool, hood drawn low, sandals caked with mud and dried blood, a thick leather satchel swinging at his side. He doesn't knock or announce himself, he just appears in the village square like he walked out of a dream, or possibly a mistake. People stop what they're doing. Bread goes unbaked, wood remains unchopped. Even the goats seem interested. Travellers are rare enough, but monks with maps, that's practically sorcery. He calls himself Brother Alric, and when asked where he's from, he smiles like someone who doesn't believe in answers. South, he says, which is a perfectly vague direction. When pressed further, he adds, I've walked from the white cliffs to the black coast, and I'm only lost when I stop. You're already hooked. The reeve lets him stay in the church annex. Father Merrick, predictably, isn't thrilled. He narrows his eyes at Alric, mutters something about foreign ideas, and stomps away with his robes flapping like angry curtains. But the villagers are curious, and curiosity is contagious. Alric carries more than just a satchel, he brings stories. Not just the kind told around fires, but different stories. Strange ones. He tells tales of cities so large they stretch beyond sight, of towers made from glass, of deserts that whisper and islands where the ground boils. At night, people gather quietly around him, pretending to be casual, but hanging on every word like their lives depend on it. You end up talking to him alone one morning, catching him sketching something in the dirt with a stick, a spiral, or maybe a constellation. You've travelled far, you say. He glances up, eyes bright. So have you? It shouldn't catch you off guard, but it does. He knows, or at least he suspects. He pats the satchel beside him. Maps, he says with a grin. I collect them, draw them, trade them, but the best ones are never on parchment. He taps his temple. They're in here, always shifting. You ask to see one, and to your surprise he obliges. He unrolls a piece of faded vellum, smoothed and stitched along the edges. What you see makes no sense. It's a mess of lines, half symbols, half guesses. Rivers flow into mountains, which turn into cities, which loop back into themselves. One part is marked with a drawing of a fish wearing a crown. Another shows a tower made of roots. This isn't a map, you say. Alric shrugs. Not yet. Over the next few days you learn more. He's a kind of holy cartographer, if that's a real thing, wandering from place to place, gathering stories, making notes. sketching what he sees and hears. The world is bigger than they want us to know, he tells you. Wider, stranger, and fuller questions the church forgot how to ask. You're not sure if he's brilliant or just mad with hunger. But either way, you can't stop listening. He shows you another scroll one evening, a timeline of strange occurrences, a rain of frogs, a talking river, a monastery where the bells rang for weeks with no one inside. All signs, he says, of thin places, places where the world splits and lets the unknown peek through. He looks at you when he says this. You feel the air shift. Sometimes people slip through too, he adds softly. You don't respond. You can't. He begins gathering followers, or rather, an audience. A boy named Cedric starts carrying his bag. An older woman offers to mend his robe. Even the blacksmith listens in when he thinks no one's watching. Alric tells them to look to the stars, to follow dreams, to ask questions. Father Merrick is livid. He interrupts one of Alric's impromptu sermons with righteous fury. He speaks in riddles! He dares suggest God hides truth from us. This is heresy disguised as wonder. Alric doesn't argue. He just listens. Later you ask him why he doesn't fight back. He smiles. Truth doesn't need defending, just patience. Eventually Merrick bars him from the church grounds. The reeve grumbles but doesn't enforce it. Villagers still visit Alric in the evenings, slipping out of their huts like guilty teenagers. You go too. You always go. One night he pulls you aside and hands you a scrap of parchment. A crude map, just a few lines and dots. If you ever decide to keep walking, he says, follow this path. It'll take you to a river that doesn't run straight, a village where clocks run backwards, and a library carved into stone. You almost laugh. None of that's real. Not yet, he replies. Historical fact. Monks in the medieval world were not all cloistered. Some, particularly those belonging to orders like the Benedictines or Franciscans, travelled widely, spreading knowledge and collecting stories or relics. Quirky fact. Early maps, like the Mappa Mundi, were often as symbolic as they were geographic, blending scripture, myth, and real-world geography into wild visual hybrids of fact and faith. Scholarly debate. Some historians argue travelling monks preserved ancient knowledge during the so-called Dark Ages, acting as crucial transmitters of science, philosophy, and geography. Others note that many were also agents of church orthodoxy, suppressing heterodox ideas while spreading their own dogma. Alric leaves quietly, the same way he arrived. One morning he's just gone. A note scratched into the dirt says, "Keep walking." You hold on to the map. You don't know if you'll ever use it. But the idea that you might, that keeps you warmer than the fire ever could. A few weeks after Alric disappears, like fog lifting in reverse, the village settles back into something resembling routine. The plague has waned, the cold has eased, and you can finally breathe without it hurting. But there's still a weight in the air, a silence under the chatter, like everyone's waiting for the next thing to go wrong, or maybe just trying to remember what normal used to feel like. Then one morning you hear it. Shouting. Bells. Not the usual bell, not the fire or death knell, this one rings in rapid bursts. Not quite an emergency, not quite a celebration. You run to the square, breath puffing white in the still cold air, and see a small group gathering around a thin, reed-voiced man, standing beside a large, sweating mule. On the mule's back is a bundle wrapped in oiled canvas. A visitor, someone whispers. Scholar, maybe a merchant. But no, this man isn't selling buttons or bootlaces. He's come from a cathedral school, or maybe a university. You catch bits of his introduction. He says he's on a circuit, travelling from town to town on church business, delivering books, notes, and updates from distant cities. When he unpacks the bundle from his mule, everyone crowds in, too close, too curious. It's a book, a real one, leather-bound, stamped with a seal, fat with stitched parchment, and so heavy it takes two people to move it. You can almost hear it hum with knowledge. A symbol of power, maybe, or just a reminder of how far behind the village has fallen. You help carry it into the church, and Merrick watches like a hawk. Books are dangerous, everyone knows that. But they're also sacred, especially this one. It's written in Latin, of course, and full of commentary on scripture, notes from scholars, and most interestingly, margins crammed with strange diagrams and doodles. The scholar, whose name is Anselm, sets up a small table in the church's side chamber, and begins offering lessons to any willing soul. Mostly the students are curious children, and a few older men trying to prove something. You sit in mostly to observe. He lectures on humours, stars and theology, but sometimes he strays into stranger topics, maps, machines, even numbers. One day he pulls out something no one expected, ink and quills. "We shall practice letters," he announces, eyes sparkling behind crooked spectacles. "Reading is breath. Writing is power." The villagers murmur. Some are excited, others nervous. One woman says, "Only priests write." Another mutters, "Words are for lords." But you of course know better. You sit and take up a quill, the dried nib scratching over rough parchment like a bird dragging its claws. You write slowly, carefully, pretending to learn something you already know by heart. The shapes are familiar, the alphabet like an old friend. You form your letters deliberately, and Anselm notices. "You've done this before," he says quietly. You hesitate. "I saw someone do it once." He doesn't press, just nods. Over the next week, a dozen villagers filter in and out of his makeshift classroom. Some learn their letters, others get frustrated and give up. But a few begin to understand, they're learning to see, and it's changing them. Tobin, the shepherd boy, takes to writing like it's a form of farming. He writes his name 20 times in a row, then tries to write yours. Griselda refuses to attend, but sends bundles of herbs wrapped in parchment for practice. She never uses them. Even Father Merrick, though stiff at first, begins to respect Anselm, or at least tolerate him. They argue in Latin when they think no one understands, about philosophy, heresy, whether the moon causes madness or God just likes a good joke. You begin helping Anselm more and more, not just lifting books or organising pages, but quietly checking people's letters, guiding their hands, suggesting better ink mixtures. You're careful not to draw attention, but you can't help the way your shoulders straighten when you hold a pen. This is your world, after all. One evening, Anselm calls you aside. "I know what you are," he says. You freeze. He continues. "You're a mind from a different world. I've seen it before, once, in Prague. A woman who knew the stars too well. She spoke of wheels and lights and machines. She vanished one winter, like mist." You stare at him. He meets your eyes, calm as water. "Don't worry," he says. "I won't betray you. But you should be careful. People aren't ready for the future. They barely survive the present." Then he hands you a folded page. On it is a diagram, a device, something mechanical. You don't know what it is exactly, but your heart quickens. It's not from this world. Or maybe it is, and just hasn't been invented yet. "Study it," he says. "Maybe it will help you find your way." Historical fact. The first universities in Europe emerged in the 12th century, including Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. These early centres of learning focused primarily on theology, medicine, and law, and were closely tied to the church. Quirky fact. In some medieval schools, students rented individual pages of a book instead of buying the whole volume. The pages were copied by hand and passed around. A kind of very slow, expensive version of Google Docs. Scholarly debate. Historians continue to debate how widespread literacy was among medieval commoners. While the church controlled most formal education, some evidence suggests that lay literacy, especially among traders, artisans, and women, was more common than previously believed. As the sun dips and the candle smoke curls up into the rafters, you sit beside Anselm at the long table in the quiet of the church. Quills scrape, pages rustle, and in that moment, something shifts. For the first time, you don't just feel like a survivor. You feel like a student again. And in a world so ruled by silence and shadow, that's its own kind of rebellion. The forge sings every morning whether you want it to or not. The blacksmith, a towering woman named Bruna, built like a barn door and twice as unyielding, starts before dawn, hammering out a rhythm that rattles every bird from its roost and announces to the village, "Yes, today we are still making things with fire and fury." You've admired her from a distance since day one, partly because she swings a hammer like she's punishing the earth, and partly because she once stared down Father Merrick when he tried to lecture her about humility. So when Bruna yells across the square one day, "You? Weird one. Come hold something," you go. You don't even hesitate. Her forge is equal parts chaos and miracle. Smoke snakes out of the roof through a cracked vent. The air smells like scorched metal and hot tar, and the walls are lined with every kind of tool imaginable. Tongs, hammers, wedges, files, and things that look like surgical instruments for demons. Sparks drift like angry fireflies whenever the bellows hiss, and the anvil glows faintly in the half-light. "Ever work with iron?" she asks, squinting through soot-streaked eyebrows. "Not exactly," you admit. She snorts. "Perfect. Less bad habits to break." She hands you a pair of tongs longer than your arm, and motions for you to hold a bar of metal steady in the coals. You do, instantly feeling the heat radiating through the iron like it wants to climb into your bones. She works fast. No nonsense, no time for gentle explanations. Hammer up, hammer down, sparks leap. The bar flattens. The rhythm is ancient and violent and weirdly beautiful. Bruna doesn't believe in wasting words, but over the course of a week, you start to understand her language. A grunt means more bellows. A glare means you're holding that wrong. A smirk means not bad soft hands. She starts calling you coalface, which you assume is a compliment. Your muscles ache in ways you didn't know were possible. Your arms hum from vibration. Your skin is dotted with tiny burns. You've sweated through every layer of clothing and probably ruined whatever dignity you had left. But you've never felt so real. There's something grounding about the forge. Something honest. The metal doesn't lie. It either bends or it breaks. You can work all day and actually see what you've done. A finished nail, a horseshoe, a hinge. It beats hauling slop or dodging curses by a mile. Bruna teaches you to listen to the colour of the metal, red for shaping, yellow for striking, white hot, and you've gone too far. It's like bread, she says. Too cold and it folds. Too hot and it burns. Catch it just right and it sings. Eventually she lets you try the hammer. You miss the anvil and nearly take off your own foot the first time. She laughs so hard she drops her tongs, but by the third attempt you land a decent strike. The clang rings out clear and satisfying like a dinner bell for the gods. You grin, sweat pouring down your face. Bruna grins back, hands on her hips. You're not completely useless, coalface. Later she shows you the finer work. You learn how to shape scrolls into hinges, how to make spirals for door latches, and how to punch holes for rivets. She even lets you help with horseshoes, though you quickly learn that holding a horse's leg while trying to hammer precise curves into hot metal is exactly as difficult and terrifying as it sounds. You start understanding the forge's rhythm, the heat, the hiss, the clang. You wake up thinking about steel, go to sleep with your hands still clenched. Your fingernails are black, your sleeves are scorched. People start calling you the Smith's Shadow. You don't correct them. And then Bruna hands you your first solo project. A simple knife. She gives you a blank strip of iron, a chunk of antler, and a piece of copper wire. "Make it something," she says, then walks off, leaving you in the quiet. You stare at it for a long time. You remember survival knives, stainless steel multi-tools, the smooth click of a folding blade. Then you push those memories aside and start hammering. It takes days. You burn yourself twice. You ruin the first handle. You file the blade too thin, start over. Then finally you hold something that resembles a knife. No, it is a knife. Bruna tests it by slicing through a turnip. She nods once. Good. Next time try something harder, like a nail. It's her version of high praise. That evening you carry your knife home like it's a relic. People ask about it. Some want to hold it. One kid offers a turnip in trade. You decline. You realise you've learned something medieval people never take for granted. How to make a tool. How to turn raw materials into something useful. Something sharp. Something yours. Historical fact. Blacksmiths were essential in medieval life, producing everything from farming tools and nails to weapons and horseshoes. Most villages had at least one, and their status was often respected, even revered. Quirky fact, some medieval blacksmiths were believed to have magical powers because they could manipulate fire and metal. In Norse and Celtic traditions, they were associated with gods and legendary heroes. Scholarly debate. Historians differ on how much formal apprenticeship existed in rural areas. While guilds governed training in cities, in villages, blacksmithing was often passed down informally, through families or direct mentorship, like you've experienced with Bruna. You sleep with a knife beside your mat that night, not for protection, but because it means something. It's proof you've made something real, that you've contributed, that you're not just drifting through this time anymore. And in the forge's afterglow, with calloused hands and burnt eyebrows, you feel strangely at home. There's a strange calm after fire, after the plague, after snow, After forging blades and burying friends and whispering across maps drawn in charcoal and dreams, you wake now in the quiet, not panicked, not starving, not bleeding, and you almost don't trust it. Peace in medieval times feels like a trap, like a wolf lying down and saying, "Go ahead, pet me." But the village has found its rhythm again, and so reluctantly have you. Spring has rolled in slow but steady, and with it come new sounds. Bees bumbling into blossoms, pigs squealing after muddy flops, and the absolutely ungodly chorus of frogs. Everything is waking up, even the people. There's colour in cheeks again. Someone finally laughs without coughing at the end of it. You watch it all unfold with cautious joy, like someone holding a cracked cup of water and praying not to spill it. But no one lets you rest for long. The reeve has called for a muster. Yes, that kind of muster. You first hear the word whispered at the well, said with both dread and a little flicker of excitement, like someone describing a dragon sighting or a really spicy confession. Then Father Merrick announces it during morning prayer with his usual flair. The Lord has summoned us to account for our numbers, to pledge our oaths, to show we stand ready to defend his lands. In modern terms, it's census plus boot camp. The muster's not a battle, not yet. It's a feudal roll call. Every man over a certain age, and in many villages, any woman strong enough to swing a tool, is expected to appear before the Lord's steward to be counted, examined and sorted. Who's fit to fight? Who's good with a bow? Who can carry messages, cook, clean, shoe a horse, repair a saddle? The idea is that if war ever breaks out, the Lord won't have to scramble for bodies. He'll know exactly which peasants he can squeeze for sword duty. You don't get a choice. You're told to show up at dawn along with the rest of the able-bodied. You put on your best clothes, by which you mean the least mud-stained tunic, and strap the knife you made to your belt. Not because it'll help, but because it feels like armour, emotional armour. The muster is held in the next village over. Everyone walks. You pass fields freshly sown with barley and oats, a few nervous-looking geese, and a merchant cart slowly being repaired by a man swearing under his breath in 3 languages. When you arrive, the steward is already there. A slim, leathery man with expensive gloves and an expression like someone who permanently smells something sour. You're herded into rows. Bruna stands beside you, arms crossed like she's ready to punch the sky if needed. Tobin hovers nearby, eyes wide, trying not to look like he's 12. Griselda is watching from a safe distance with a basket of herbs and an I-told-you-so smirk. The steward begins his assessments. One by one, villagers step forward. He asks their name, their trade, checks their hands, their backs, their teeth if he's feeling especially judgy. A man who limps gets waved off. A woman with impressive shoulders and a smithing scar across her chin is noted with interest. They get slotted. Militia, supply, messenger, non-combatant. No one is exempt. Then it's your turn. You step forward. The steward squints. Name? You freeze. Your real name doesn't belong here. You blurt out Coalface. There's a beat, a snort from someone in the back. The steward frowns. Trade? You consider your options: blacksmith in training, amateur scribe, accidental time traveller. Smith, you say. I work iron. He takes your hand, examines the calluses, then eyes your knife. You make that? You nod. He taps the blade. Too thin, he says flatly. Still good balance. He marks something on his scroll and waves you off. You exhale only once you're back in the line. The muster continues for hours. People are drilled, told to lift sacks of grain, jog short distances, pull back makeshift bowstrings. You watch one man vomit halfway through a spear throw. He's still assigned to field defence. The bar is low. You get placed in the artisan support class, a vague category that mostly means you won't be in the front line, but will still yell at you. You're relieved, and a little insulted. Bruna, unsurprisingly, is labelled essential. The steward practically bows to her hammer. After the muster, everyone's given a clay token stamped with a crude seal. It's your new identity, at least as far as the Lord is concerned. If war breaks out, you bring the token. If it's missing, you're in trouble. If it's broken, you're in deep trouble. You're told to keep it on you at all times. That night, back in the village, a strange kind of energy simmers. Some people are nervous, others proud, and a few drunk on the idea that they might soon be soldiers, even if all they have ever held is a shovel. You sit near the fire and turn the clay token over in your fingers. It's simple, crumbly, unremarkable, but it represents something huge. Historical fact. Medieval musters were a key part of the feudal system. Lords conducted periodic assessments of their vassals and tenants to determine who could serve in military or logistical roles in times of war or rebellion. Quirky fact: in some regions, peasants brought homemade weapons, clubs, scythes, slings, to musters, and these were recorded as part of the local militia's inventory. Sometimes chickens were noted too, in case they could be used for food during campaigns. Scholarly debate. Some historians argue musters were more symbolic than practical, ways for lords to assert authority rather than truly prepare for war. Others believe these gatherings formed the backbone of early medieval military organisation, especially before standing armies were common. Later that week, Father Merrick gives a sermon on duty, sacrifice, and the divine righteousness of the sword. You mostly tune him out. Your mind is elsewhere. On the token in your pocket, the pressure of being counted, the sharp new awareness that at any moment someone might come knocking and say, "Time to fight." You don't want war, you've survived plague and cold, almost joined a revolt, and learned to forge iron with your bare hands. But now you may have to use it. It begins with a rumour, because that's how everything starts in this place. Quiet, sideways, whispered over stew pots and smuggled through backdoor conversations like contraband. "They're coming," someone mutters. "Not our lord, the other one," and you tilt your head like a confused dog. "Which other one?" you ask. "There's always another lord," the person says, and walks away. That afternoon the village gets tense. Not like the plague tense or the tax tense. This is different. Sharp, eager, like a match waiting to strike. People start packing bags. Not many things, just the essentials: food, water, a blanket if you're lucky, a tool or weapon if you have one. Griselda lines her basket with salt and sage. Bruna pulls her hammer from the forge and sharpens the back end. Father Merrick prays louder than usual. Even the geese are louder, as if sensing something grim riding on the wind. By sundown it's no longer a rumour. The reeve confirms it in a voice tight with fear. "Our Lord's men ride tonight. They want able hands, fighters, runners. They say the border's been breached." You didn't even know there was a border, but now apparently it's broken. A courier arrives with a scroll and a coat of arms you don't recognise. He's on a horse so muddy it looks sculpted out of clay. He reads a decree in bad Latin and worse grammar. You catch the gist. The neighbouring lord, your lord's longtime rival, has sent raiding parties into the lands nearby. Barns burned, grain stolen, one village razed. Your village, sleepy and small, just got upgraded to strategic. Congratulations. You try to process this with your usual logic, but logic doesn't work here. Wars don't happen for reasons. They happen because someone's cousin sneezed on someone else's inheritance 3 generations ago. Or because one lord thinks another lord looked at his oxen the wrong way. You're now part of this nonsense, and you're being called up. The steward who ran the muster is back, grinning like he's thrilled to be proven necessary. "Bring your tokens!" he shouts. "We march at dawn." You find Bruna polishing her boots with something that might be lamp oil. "We're going?" you ask. "We're going," she replies. "Not because I want to, but because if I don't, they'll drag me by the hair." You clutch your knife. You consider running. Then you consider the fact that you have nowhere to go. So you pack. Your gear is laughably simple: a leather satchel with a chunk of bread, a half-empty flask, a coil of rope, and your knife tucked into a piece of cloth so it doesn't slice your leg open while walking. You borrow a padded jerkin that smells like someone else's anxiety. Your boots are already coming apart at the heel. At sunrise, the group assembles. 24 villagers, some armed with spears, some with sticks, a few with actual swords that look like family heirlooms with stories no one wants to tell. The reeve gives a speech. It's short and unhelpful, and mostly consists of, "Do your duty and don't embarrass me." Then you march. The journey is slow, damp, and painful in ways you hadn't anticipated. The road is more mud than road, and the army you've joined is barely a dozen more soldiers than your group. They wear chainmail and serious expressions, and do not make small talk. You pass burned fields, empty cottages, and a dead cow with arrows sticking out of it like bristles on a porcupine. You try not to look long. Your first night in the camp is miserable. Tents are sparse, firewood scarcer, and the food tastes like a salted stone. Bruna snores beside you under a shared tarp. Tobin curls up like a cat and mutters in his sleep. You stare at the stars and try not to think about what happens when arrows start flying. And then nothing happens. Not at first. The next day is spent building barricades and digging trenches. You get assigned to support, which mostly means carry things until your back gives out. You haul sacks of flour, hammer stakes, tie knots until your fingers ache. The regular soldiers ignore you. The captain yells at everyone indiscriminately. That night, Bruna teaches you to swing a club properly. Don't aim for the head, she says. Too small, aim for centre mass, knock the wind out, then run. You ask if she's done this before. Once, she says. Didn't end well, but I lived. So, it ended well enough. The next morning, word arrives. Scouts spotted movement near the woods. Everyone tenses. This is it. Except it isn't. Because the movement turns out to be a wandering band of displaced villagers, scared, starving and cold. They're allowed into the camp, but barely. The soldiers mutter about spies. You help a woman with 3 children find a place by the fire. She thanks you with her eyes, doesn't speak once. Finally, on the 5th day, the enemy appears. Not an army, not knights in shining armour, just raiders, a dozen or so wearing mismatched gear, riding hard, hoping to catch the camp off guard. They fail, but not without damage. The alarm sounds too late. A sentry gets taken out with an arrow before he can yell. Chaos erupts. You run before you think, knife in hand, head down. You don't even see the raiders until they're practically on top of you. You duck. Something sharp flashes past your face. You hear someone scream. Bruna charges in, swinging a hammer like it's Judgment Day. Tobin throws a rock and hits someone in the helmet. You survive. Barely. One raider makes it past the line and sets fire to a cart. Another slashes a tent open and steals bread before being tackled by 3 cooks. It's messy, clumsy, loud, and over in minutes. You stand in the aftermath, panting, holding your knife like it's holy. Your sleeve is torn, someone else's blood is on your shoulder. You've never felt more alive, or more terrified. The captain surveys the damage. Not bad, he says. They'll think twice next time. You don't say it aloud, but you think, they probably won't think at all. Historical fact. Feudal levies often provided lords with manpower during regional skirmishes and land disputes. These local armies were poorly equipped and rarely trained, often serving only for a limited time before returning home. Quirky fact, in some battles, cooks, blacksmiths, and even shepherds fought alongside soldiers, carrying homemade weapons. One recorded case involved a monk using a chair leg in a skirmish outside his monastery. Scholarly debate. Historians disagree about the effectiveness of these peasant levies. Some view them as symbolic shows of loyalty, while others note their tactical advantage in sheer numbers and local knowledge. That night, after the fire is put out and the wounded attended to, you sit beside Bruna, staring at the glowing coals. No one speaks for a while. Finally she mutters, "Still want to be a smith?" You nod. She smiles. "I thought so." The war, or whatever that chaotic mess of smoke and yelling was supposed to be, never officially ends. It just fizzles out, like a candle stub running out of wax. A week after the raid, the captain receives a letter delivered by a red-eyed saddle-sore boy who looks like he's aged 10 years just carrying the thing. The message is long, sealed with a blob of crimson wax, and full of heavy words about strategic stand-down and reallocation of forces. What it actually means is, go home. No one cheers, no one even smiles. Everyone's too tired. The camp is broken down slowly, like it's unsure if this is a trick. Some of the soldiers leave that night, vanishing into the mist with their armour clanking like distant wind chimes. You, Bruna, and the rest of your village cohort are told to report back for debriefing, which sounds important, but mostly involves someone grunting "you survived, good job," and handing you a chunk of bread shaped like disappointment. The march home is quieter than the march there. Feet drag, shoulders slump. The countryside looks different now, less like a painting, more like a memory you don't trust. Every tree seems suspicious. Every farmhouse looks recently abandoned. You pass a field where a scarecrow's been ripped in half, its straw guts scattered like bad omens. When the village finally comes into view, it hits you. Hard. You're not the same, and neither is this place. The square is smaller. The huts a little more crooked. The sky somehow lower. People wave as you return, but their faces are cautious, like they're waiting to see who came back missing pieces. Tobin runs to hug his sister. Bruna tosses her satchel into the forge shed without a word. Father Merrick rings the bell twice and offers a muttered prayer that includes the phrase "cleansing flame," more than seems necessary. You stand in the middle of it all, unsure where to go. Eventually your legs take you to the forge. Bruna's already stoking the coals. She doesn't look up as she says, "If you're staying, grab the tongs. If not, shut the door behind you." You grab the tongs, and just like that, you're back to it. The rhythm of normal life takes a few days to find again. Your fingers forget how to rest. Your ears still ring with shouts and clash. You sleep in fits, wake up at odd hours expecting alarm bells. But the forge helps, the metal listens. Each strike feels like therapy. You don't talk much, neither does Bruna. That's how you know everything's okay. Then one evening, Griselda knocks on the forge door. She's holding a package, wrapped in linen, tied with string, smelling faintly of ink and smoke. She places it in your hands and says, "He sent this." Inside is a letter from Anselm, written in your language, your original language, the kind that bends around grammar like a dance and uses punctuation like poetry. You stare at the page, fingers trembling, and read, "I saw the stars again last night. They still remember you. I hope you still remember them. You may not be able to go back, but you can go forward. You are the bridge, friend. You are the thin place. Never stop walking, never stop making, and never forget that even in a world of mud, iron, and silence, you matter." Beneath the letter is something else. A small folded map, more detailed than the one before. This one shows paths you've only guessed at. A river that bends like a snake. A mountain marked with a symbol that might be a door. A dot labelled simply, "The place where the sky opens." It doesn't say where it ends. You hold the map for a long time staring at the lines. Later that night you walk the perimeter of the village. The stars are out, clear and cold and humming. You look up and see Orion, or something like it. You wonder if anyone else in the village knows what that shape means. Maybe, maybe not, maybe it doesn't matter. Back in the forge, you tuck the letter and the map into a satchel and hang it on the wall. Not because you're leaving yet, but because you know, now, that you will. Soon. For now, there are horses to shoe, gates to mend, hinges to twist. Bruna needs an extra hand with a bell commission for the church, and Griselda's requested new handles for her herb knives. Father Merrick grudgingly admits he may need a cross repaired. Even the jester, who finally wandered back into the village one foggy morning without explanation, asks if you can forge a new flute mouthpiece. "The last one exploded," he says proudly. A very dramatic note. You laugh. It feels strange, almost foreign, but real. Historical fact. After medieval skirmishes or campaigns, levied peasants typically returned home without much fanfare. Most records of these commoner veterans are sparse, though some gained status or trade skills during their time in service. Quirky fact, some medieval soldiers, upon returning from campaigns, carried lucky charms forged during the war. Nails, coins, or tiny knives engraved with symbols, believed to ward off nightmares or disease. Scholarly debate. There is disagreement over the psychological impact of war on medieval peasants. Some argue the brutality was normalised by their already harsh lives. Others point to folk tales and songs that reflect deep trauma and cultural scarring. A few days later you sit by the forge fire with Bruna, passing a flask back and forth, watching the embers rise. "You're leaving eventually, aren't you?" she says, not looking at you. You nod. "Good," she says, "but not too soon. I've got a gate hinge that needs 3 hands and a curse." You smile. "Deal." The village sleeps, the world spins, and somewhere a door is waiting. And so here you are, months later, maybe a year, maybe more. It's hard to tell exactly, because time in this world doesn't tick like it used to. It breathes. It moves in the sway of a blacksmith's hammer, in the soft creak of a church bell rope, in the rhythm of frost giving way to rain, rain to mud, mud to green. You've survived plague and winter, wars and hunger. You've learned to hold a blade steady, to read and write in a world that barely remembers what letters mean. You've sharpened your senses on the grit of survival and polished your patience with every bowl of turnip stew. But more than anything, you've changed. You've gone from a stranger in rags to someone who matters, someone people nod to in the square, someone kids ask questions, someone with a knife they made, a hammer they earned, and a future they're no longer running from. You haven't left yet, but you will. The satchel is packed. The map waits. The road is out there, winding through the forest like a dare. You'll follow it someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe in the spring. For now, there's comfort in routine, in the crackle of the forge, in knowing you could leave. That might be enough. You lie down on your haymat, the one you hated at first, and realise it feels like home now. The night hums around you, quiet frogs, distant wolves, the soft breathing of people who trust you not to vanish before morning. You survived medieval times, barely, but you didn't just survive, you lived. And maybe, just maybe, you're not done yet.